Hello, dear viewers. Support me by subscribing to my channel and share my video if you like it. And also, make sure you comment your thoughts. Now let's start the video. The swirling portal of purple energy parted like curtains, revealing a sunlit town square bustling with activity. Ashbourne and Amazo stepped out into the open area, cobblestone beneath their feet, as dozens of people paused to stare in curiosity at the odd duo who had just appeared out of thin air. Wooden stalls, shopkeepers, and banners fluttered in the wind, clearly a lively town, albeit one not nearly as technologically advanced. Amazo scanned the area. This world doesn't seem to be advanced as well. Ashbourne surveying the scene. We'll give it a quick check. But before he could finish, an explosion thundered behind them. Dust and shards of stone rained down as a train burst violently out from underground, metal grinding and screeching. 4 figures were flung from the derailed vehicle, tumbling across the stone ground. The two watched, unmoving, as the girls, all teenagers, each clad in a distinctive outfit and wielding unique weapons, scrambled to their feet. The youngest, wearing a red cloak, spotted Ashbourne and Amazo and screamed, "You need to run, Grimm are coming." Neither of them reacted. Ashbourne simply observed with a bemused expression, "I think you have a good chance here." Amazo turned toward him, a spark of curiosity on his face. "You know this one too?" "Yes," Ashbourne replied, gaze fixed ahead. "There should be one here, and in the city right now." For the first time, Amazo's face lit with something resembling hope. Before the girls could speak again, the ground trembled, and monstrous creatures cloaked in black and bone-white masks emerged from the ruptured tunnel. The girls instinctively took a battle stance, their eyes wide with horror. "I hope you two know how to fight," yelled the blonde girl, brandishing her gauntlets as civilians screamed and scattered in panic. Ashbourne, unfazed, spoke calmly to Amazo. "A demonstration in order." His shadow darkened and spread like a living oil spill, stretching over the entire square. An enormous dome of darkness soon engulfed the train, the tunnel, and the Grimm alike. From the thick shadows, tendrils shot out like spears and ensnared everything in their path. Ashbourne raised his hand, fingers curling into a fist. With a low groan and a sucking sound, the tendrils dragged the Grimm, the train, and the tunnel's debris into the gaping abyss. Within seconds, all of it vanished, leaving behind nothing but stunned silence and the horrified gazes of the 4 girls. "This definitely will get attention," Ashbourne said. Amazo pointed toward the girls. "More like fear." Ashbourne chuckled. From his still-spreading shadow, several figures began to emerge. A sleek white and black dog bounded out first, yipping as it was enveloped in a tight hug by the red-cloaked girl. A man with a green head and trench coat. Then, another man in a white coat and orange hair stumbled out, disoriented. Next to him stood a petite girl with mismatched eyes and an umbrella. Roman Torchwick and Neapolitan. Ashbourne approached them with a smile. "Well, hello there. I hope you enjoyed my Shadow Express, the finest and only of its kind." Roman blinked, halfway between confusion and fear. "What the hell?" "You can leave," Ashbourne said with a casual gesture. "But I sincerely advise you to change your ways." The girls, regaining their composure, screamed in protest, "He's a criminal." Ashbourne raised a single finger. The 4 froze instantly, eyes wide, mouths silenced, bodies paralyzed mid-movement. Roman and Neo stared, terrified. Roman swallowed. "If I don't change, you'll kill me." Ashbourne laughed a low, smooth, amused sound. "Of course not, but bad things might happen. For instance, while you're laughing and ranting over a burning city from the sky, a Grimm swoops in and eats you whole. Your girlfriend here swears revenge, but gets enslaved by a color-talking cat, and then she becomes a tree." Roman went pale. "That's oddly random and specific." Ashbourne's smile widened further, and his glowing purple eyes locked onto Roman's with eerie amusement. Roman didn't need more convincing. He quickly stood up, tugging Neo with him. "Well, good sir, it was nice meeting you. I sincerely hope I don't see you ever again." Ashbourne waved. "Goodbye, fine thief." And with that, Roman and Neo vanished into the crowd, shaken but alive. The 4 girls remained frozen in place, expressions stuck in a blend of awe, fear, and confusion. Ashbourne turned toward Amazo, eyes gleaming. "Let's wait a little. Our ride will be coming soon." Ashbourne glanced at the 4 frozen girls and flicked his fingers. The invisible force binding them dissolved instantly. "It is rude to interrupt gentlemen's talk," he said. The blonde one, still bristling, snapped, "He was a thief, a terrorist, and you just let him go." Ashbourne tilted his head with exaggerated politeness. "It is also rude to speak to someone without introducing yourself first. You look suspicious that way." The blonde blinked, caught off guard. "What?" Before the tension could rise again, the youngest girl quickly stepped in, pointing at each person as she spoke. "I'm Ruby. That's my sister Yang. My teammates Blake and Weiss. And this is Professor." "Doctor," the green-haired man with the thermos corrected sharply. "Dr. Oobleck." Ashbourne gave them a slow, courteous nod. "Ashbourne Black. And this is my son, Amazo Black." Yang scowled. "You let that criminal go." Ashbourne's voice was calm, smooth. "Are you training to be a huntress?" Yang crossed her arms. "Yes, what's that got to do with anything?" "As an aspiring huntress," Ashbourne said, voice still patient, "how can you ask someone else to do your job, and a civilian at that?" Yang clenched her fists. "Which part of you is a civilian?" Ashbourne gave a long, dramatic sigh. "I am an upstanding citizen who hates violence. But this generation's huntsmen and huntresses forced my hand. This world has no future." Yang's eye twitched. "You are an asshole, aren't you?" Ashbourne turned to Amazo and asked with a perfectly straight face, "Did I say something wrong?" Amazo, ever the loyal and honest son, shook his head. "No, father is indeed a peace-loving individual." Ruby tilted her head. "How old are you? You don't look old enough to have a child this old." "I'm nearing 26. Ashbourne answered. "I adopted Amazo when I was 22. Ruby's eyebrows furrowed. "How does that even work? How old is he?" "Amazo is 6 years old, Ashbourne said casually. Boy stepped forward with a scowl. "You dunce, he's messing with you." Ashbourne raised a hand to his chest, mock offended. "How rude, I am completely serious." Weiss scoffed. "You're already this old and still acting like a child. Grow up." Ashbourne gave a sly smile. "Okay, Ice Queen." Weiss's eyes narrowed dangerously, irritation bubbling behind her composed expression. But before she could deliver a biting retort, the distant whirring of engines cut through the air. A fleet of airships was rapidly approaching overhead. Ashbourne smiled, eyes gleaming with anticipation. "This is all right." High above the grounds of Beacon Academy in the Headmaster, the atmosphere was heavy with unease. The wide screen before them played a looped video, grainy but clear enough to chill the spine. A vast field was seen overtaken by a creeping, undulating mass of pure darkness. It moved like a living ocean of shadow, devouring everything in its path. Even the monstrous Grimm, known for their fearlessness and savagery, were swallowed whole, their bodies dissipating into nothing the moment the tendrils pulled them. And in the center of it all stood a single man with glowing purple eyes. General Ironwood stepped back from the monitor, his jaw clenched. "How could someone be able to do this?" he muttered, voice grave. "And who is that guy?" Glinda Goodwich's arms were crossed tightly, her lips pressed into a hard line. Her eyes didn't leave the screen. This is unheard of," she said at last, her voice low, controlling darkness on such a scale. "No human should be capable of that." The silence that followed was suffocating. Osmian stood at the edge of the room, still staring at the image frozen on the screen. His face had gone pale, the usual calm in his eyes replaced with something rarely seen. Fear. He knew what they didn't. A power that vast, a darkness so alive he had seen it once before. The god of darkness. Osmian's hand trembled slightly as he adjusted his glasses. The implications tore through his mind like wildfire. Could it be? Was the god walking remnant again? This time in human form? And if so, what was he planning? Osmian felt the weight of the world pressing down on him. The last time the god of darkness walked the world, it ended in devastation. Cities crumbled, kingdoms were lost, humanity was nearly erased. And if anyone made the mistake of provoking him again, would the world survive a second time? "Do you think he is related to her?" Ironwood asked, his eyes not leaving the video. "I don't think so," he stopped the Grimm, after all. Glinda replied thoughtfully. Osmian didn't speak. He didn't have words to say. The fear was the only thing filling him. The aircraft hummed softly as it soared through the skies toward Beacon. Ashbourne and Amazo sat quietly across from Timor W. by the four girls each wore different expressions. Ruby offered a bright, genuine smile. Thanks again for the help, she said warmly. Ashbourne nodded slightly in acknowledgement. Yang, seated beside her, had her arms crossed, eyes narrowed and jaw tense. She clearly wasn't thrilled about sharing space with them. Weiss sat stiffly, choosing to ignore their presence entirely, a calculated coldness to her demeanor. Meanwhile, Blake's amber eyes observed Ashbourne intently, her gaze filled with both curiosity and uncertainty. Ruby leaned forward, attempting to lighten the mood as she began explaining their mission, the one involving Mountain Glen, the White Fang, and the growing threat against Vale. Ashbourne listened calmly, nodding at each point, as if he already knew the story before she said it. As Ruby finished, Blake's voice cut through the hum of the engines. What happened to the White Fang operatives? She asked suddenly, her eyes locked on Ashbourne. Ashbourne replied flatly, all of them are dead. Blake's eyes widened in shock. Your darkness killed them, she demanded. Ashbourne admitted to her casually, yes, anyone wearing a white mask was eliminated. Blake's breath hitched, her expression tightening. How could you do that? And you let the ringleader escape? Ashbourne merely shrugged. I felt like doing that. The two had personalities. The White Fang operatives were bland. But if it helps, go ahead and call me a close-minded racist or something. Blake's mouth opened in disbelief, too angry and stunned to speak. Ruby's voice rose, soft but firm. That's cruel and wrong. Ashbourne met her eyes with a calm look. They would have died anyway if I wasn't there. Their fate was already set in stone. I had the power to change it, but I chose not to. So, it's fine. Yang's fists clenched as she leaned forward. You're quite the piece of human scum, aren't you? Ruby glanced at her sister, frowning. That's not nice, Yang. Ashbourne waved it off. It's fine, Ruby. I don't take offense easily, but I do find it surprising that you two are sisters. You seem kind and intelligent, while your sister comes off as a bimbo. Yang shot to her feet, fury blazing in her eyes. Who are you calling a bimbo? Ashbourne raised a finger and pointed at her, froze her in place. She hovered mid-motion, stuck between lunging and shouting. Blake and Weiss tensed instinctively. Ruby blinked, looking curiously between her frozen sister and Ashbourne. What's a bimbo? She asked. Ashbourne replied plainly, a bimbo is an attractive but unintelligent or frivolous blonde young woman. Your sister clearly isn't that intelligent, and considering how she's constantly exposing her chest for no reason. Ruby turned to Yang and tilted her head, thoughtful. Yang isn't unintelligent, she said at last. Is she rash? Ashbourne pressed. Ruby nodded slowly. Yeah. Then that's a form of unintelligence, he concluded. I see, Ruby said, then turned to her sister and added innocently, no need to be angry, Yang. Bimbo doesn't seem that bad, and it kinda describes you. Yang's eyes widened in sheer horror. Blake and Weiss looked at Ruby as if she'd suddenly grown horns. Ruby said, please release my sister from whatever you had done. Ashbourne nodded and released Yang. I am not a bimbo, Yang blurted the moment Ashbourne released her. She turned on Ruby aghast. Don't ever use that word again. Then she rounded on Ashbourne, seething. And don't corrupt my sister, you scum. Ashbourne tilted his head, genuinely confused. Did I say anything wrong? Yang's fists clenched at her sides, shaking. Ruby quickly stepped between them, hands raised. We're about to arrive at Beacon. Let's not fight, okay? The tension settled just enough for the aircraft to continue its descent in relative silence, only the faint sound of Yang quietly fuming in the corner. The aircraft touched down gently on Beacon's landing pad. As the doors slid open, Team RWY and their guests stepped out into the light. Waiting for them stood Headmaster Ozpin, Headmistress Glinda Goodwitch, and General James Ironwood. Ironwood stepped forward first, his posture rigid and commanding, his every movement radiating military authority. Welcome to Beacon, he said firmly, offering a nod toward Ashbourne and Amazo, and thank you for defending Vale. Ashbourne returned the gesture with a faint smile. It was no problem, he said smoothly. I am Ashbourne Black, and this is my son, Amazo. He paused for a beat before continuing, his tone shifting slightly. Actually, I was hoping to speak with you, General. There's a rather important matter I wish to discuss privately. Ironwood's brow furrowed slightly. What kind of urgent matter? Ashbourne gave him a knowing smile. Let's not waste time with questions here. It's best discussed elsewhere. He turned to Amazo. Stay with Team RW, explore the place. Young immediately frowned. Why would we show him anything? She snapped. Ashbourne turned toward her, disappointment on his face. How rude of you. We are guests, and you're treating us like this. Seriously, what are they teaching students these days? Before the tension could rise further, Osbean stepped forward with a calm but firm voice. Team RWA, please accompany Mr. Black Jr. around the campus. Though Yang still looked displeased, the girls obeyed without further protest, falling in line as Ashbourne walked away alongside the three senior figures, heading toward the headmaster's tower. As they walked, Ruby turned to Amazo and smiled. So, what do you want to see first? I have no preferences, Amazo replied plainly, his tone calm and neutral. Meanwhile, at the top of the tower, Ashbourne stood with Ironwood, Ozpin, and Glinda in the briefing chamber. He didn't waste time with formalities. I want you to put my son, Amazo, in the same team as Penny Polendina. Ironwood blinked, his face hardening. I can't do that. And even if I could, why? Ashbourne's expression remained cool and confident. You can do it. You're the headmaster of Atlas Academy. And a general. What you say goes. And as for why, I want Amazo to interact with someone similar to him. Ironwood's eyes widened. He's like Penny? Ashbourne nodded slowly. Yes. And I don't take things for free. In return for helping me, I can help you with something of your choice. He leaned in slightly. For example, I can help you recover. You'll have actual limbs again, flesh and bone instead of metal. Ironwood stiffened. His mind reeled, caught between disbelief and hope. Glinda, who had been silent until now, looked between them with confusion. What is going on? She demanded. What is he talking about, James? And what do you mean by helping him recover? Axpin's face was pale, his usual composed mask beginning to falter. Glinda, calm down. He turned toward Ashbourne, his voice lower and cautious. Why are you back? Ashbourne met Ozpin's gaze with open amusement. You stay out of it, he said dismissively. Reaching into his coat, Ashbourne produced a vial of shimmering red liquid. He held it up before Ironwood's eyes. If you drink this, he said, your limbs will grow back. Your injuries, all of them, will be fully healed. A good trade, no? Ironwood narrowed his eyes. Do you expect me to trust someone I just met and drink some unknown thing? Ashbourne's grin deepened. Let's say I'm not lying. Let's say you can be healed completely. In your eyes, is that a fair trade? Ironwood hesitated. There was a long silence. Then he slowly nodded. It is, but that still doesn't answer my question. Ashbourne's smile widened. It's simple, he said, as his eyes began to glow a deep, unnatural purple. I force you to drink it, and all is good. It wasn't long after they had parted ways that Team RW Bai and Amazo encountered Ashbourne again. He stood casually in the hallway, hands folded behind his back, wearing a smug expression. Happy news for all of you, Ashbourne announced with a smile. We'll be staying at Beacon, and Amazo will be attending classes with you all. Amiso gave a small nod. He showed no objection to whatever his father had planned. The girls, however, had mixed reactions. Ruby blinked in surprise. Blake tilted her head, uncertain. Weiss narrowed her eyes slightly, and Yang immediately stepped forward with her arms crossed. How could they allow you two to stay at Beacon? She asked loudly, her voice laced with disbelief. Ashbourne replied coolly, I'm quite convincing. And think of it as a chance to interact with a different crowd. Maybe it'll fix your attitude, strengthen your ethical values. His eyes slid lazily to Yang, and help you start dressing in a more refined manner, like your sister or the Ice Queen here. Yang's eyes flared with fire. There's nothing wrong with me or my style. Ashbourne sighed dramatically and shook his head. Look, even your sister agrees that you... Before he could finish, Yang launched at him with a furious shout. In a flash, Ashbourne lazily pointed at her. Yang froze in midair, locked mid-punch, her body paralyzed by invisible force. You don't learn, do you? Ashbourne muttered, stepping closer. He glanced up at her suspended form. And yet you feel offended when I call you a bimbo. The irony. With that, he turned and began walking down the corridor. Son, let's go prepare our room. I made sure we got the closest to your new 4 friends dorm. He gave the girls a casual wave without looking back. See you soon. Amazo gave the team a polite nod. Thank you for the tour. He turned and followed Ashbourne silently. Yang dropped to the ground a moment later, groaning. I swear, she muttered through clenched teeth. One day, I'm going to break that asshole's face. Ruby watched Ashbourne disappear down the hallway. I don't know, he's not that bad. He's kind of funny. Yang rounded on her. You're my sister. You're supposed to be on my side. Ruby raised both hands in surrender. I am on your side. Wise let out an exasperated breath. Let's go back to our dorms. I've had enough today. Back in the headmaster's office, silence hung heavy in the air. General Ironwood sat on the floor completely naked, staring blankly into space, his face devoid of emotion. His limbs, once cold and metallic, were now warm and human again. But there was no joy in his expression. Glinda stood beside him, arms crossed and clearly uncomfortable. Shouldn't you be happy? She asked, her voice strained. Your wounds are healed, your limbs are back. Ironwood slowly exhaled, still not looking up. I would have been, if not for feeling so violated. Ozpin stood by the window, pinching the bridge of his nose with a sigh. James, at least wear something. The room was quiet and sparsely furnished. 2 beds, one on each side, and a single large window in the center overlooking Beacon's sprawling campus. Ashbourne sat on the edge of his bed, absently gazing out the window, while Amazo stood by, his gaze inquisitive. Father, Amazo began, is it really okay to keep annoying people like that? Ashbourne smirked faintly, not looking away. It's fine, they're still young and still know no malice. Besides, they were tense after seeing my shadow. It's a good distraction. Keeps them relaxed to some extent. Amazo tilted his head, but why show it in the first place? I could have handled the Grim or just retreated without exposing that level of power. Ashbourne finally turned to him, his expression calm. In this world, people unlock something called aura. With it, a semblance manifests. A power unique to each person. They'll assume my shadow is my semblance. It will be just another semblance, albeit a little over the top. But I must admit, I am as baffled as I am amused by Yang. She is showing hostility after seeing some of what I can do. I wonder how long she will continue to try punching me. I see, Amazo replied, absorbing the information while ignoring Ashbourne musings. Then, what am I supposed to do here exactly? Well, for now, Ashbourne said, reclining on the bed. You attend school, you'll soon be placed in a team with a girl named Penny. Amazo raised an eyebrow. Penny? Is she the android? Ashbourne nodded. Yes. Like you, she's more than metal and wires, she has a soul and emotions. It'll be good for you. Experience what it's like to flirt, connect, you might even like it. Amazo blinked. I have multiple recorded plans on how to approach and flirt with girls. Ashbourne chuckled heartily. Keep it simple. Act normal. See where things go. Amazo paused thoughtfully, then gave a slow nod. The next day came with clear skies and energetic chatter as students filled the combat class. Amazo walked calmly through the gates. Class schedule in hand, he scanned the crowd and immediately spotted T-Mare WY sitting with a few others. A blonde boy chatting nervously, a boy with black hair and a pink streak, and 2 girls, one orange-haired and loud, the other red-haired and calm. As eyes turned toward him, Amazo gave a small wave and took a nearby seat, his posture upright and composed. Moments later, 3 newcomers sat beside him, a graceful raven-haired woman with piercing amber eyes, a silver-haired young man with a confident smirk, and a mint-haired girl with a casual but calculating gaze. Cinder, the woman introduced herself, nodding politely. These are Mercury and Emerald. We are from Haven. Amazo Black, he responded evenly. I'm a temporary student here. Cinder's eyes narrowed slightly in interest. I saw the footage of yesterday. Was the darkness your semblance? Amazo shook his head. That was my father's power. He controls and commands the shadows. Emerald whistled softly. Impressive and terrifying. I don't think anyone could fight something like that. Amazo nodded. Father is on a whole different level from the rest of humanity. Before Cinder could probe further, the doors opened with forceful precision. Glinda Goodwitch entered the arena, her expression strict as ever. Her gaze swept across the gathered students and lingering just a second longer on Amazo. Today, she announced, we have a guest joining our ranks. Mr. Amazo Black will be attending our classes for the time being. She paused, then focused directly on him. To ensure you're properly placed, could you share how much huntsman training or formal combat experience you've received? Amazo stood without hesitation. None. I was designed to be combat-ready, capable of adapting and evolving as necessary. A hushed silence fell over the class. Glinda blinked. Designed? I am not a human, Amazo said calmly. I am an android, a synthetic being created with the capacity to learn, adapt, and evolve. Murmurs erupted across the room. Eyes widened. Even Glinda seemed momentarily stunned, a flicker of uncertainty passing through her otherwise composed face. Glinda Goodwitch narrowed her eyes. Is this some kind of joke? Amazo calmly shook his head. He knew her skepticism was natural, even expected. Can you prove that? Glinda asked. She braced herself for some ridiculous claim or childish explanation, but what followed made every jaw in the room drop. Without a word, Amazo stepped to the side of the room and his body shimmered with golden energy. His form expanded, rising and reshaping until a towering golden giant over 3 meters tall stood before them. His form sleek and perfect, glowing with subtle internal light. This is my true form, Amazo spoke, his voice deeper and mechanical, yet undeniably intelligent. My human appearance is purely for convenience. It was modeled after a younger version of my father. Silence. Then stunned murmuring. Ruby, unable to contain herself, pointed with wide eyes. Wait, he really adopted you. Amazo shifted back into his human form, blinking. My father told you no lies. Glinda took a breath, recomposing herself with visible effort. This is difficult to process. It's hard to assess you as we would a typical student. Her voice steadied. Would you mind undergoing a combat test to evaluate your abilities? Amazo nodded. How will this test proceed? Come to the stage, Glinda said, gesturing toward the sparring platform. You'll face off against another student. Without hesitation, Amazo walked to the center of the room. Glinda turned to the crowd. Mr. Winchester, would you join us? Cardin Winchester stood up with a smug grin. You want me to fight the smart toaster? I'd never turn that down. Glinda checked her scroll for aura levels and frowned. Since you have no aura to track, I'll stop the match if it gets too dangerous for you. Amazo looked at her curiously. Is aura normally required in these class combats? It is, Glinda confirmed. Suddenly, Amazo closed his eyes for 2 seconds, then opened them. I have aura now. Glinda blinked and glanced back at her scroll. The screen updated, showing a green bar, Amazo's aura full and active. How? She asked, baffled. I analyzed your aura signature and generated one of my own, Amazo answered. It is part of my continuous evolution capability. Whispers erupted across the arena. Even the previously smug Cardin seemed a little less sure of himself. Trying to regain control of the class, Glinda took a step back. Do you require a weapon? Amazo shook his head. I can create one if necessary. Cardin scoffed. These little tricks won't help you. Glinda raised her hand. Fight however you like. Begin. Cardin laughed and charged, bringing his mace crashing into Amazo's face. A solid impact, and Amazo didn't even blink. The aura bar didn't drop an inch. Cardin attacked again. Once, twice, 3 times. Still nothing. How is your aura not dropping? Cardin shouted. I am generating it constantly, Amazo replied. Your damage output is insufficient. That's not fair. You can't just have infinite aura. Amazo blinked. Understood, setting constant aura levels to match yours. The crowd murmured, trying to process what they just heard. Cardin snarled and lunged again, but this time, Amazo's hand snapped up and caught his arm mid-swing. The casual punch to the chest, he sent Cardin flying across the arena. The force knocked Cardin's aura into the red immediately, and he groaned as he skidded to a stop. The room was silent again. Even Glinda's expression cracked into disbelief. Amazo turned to her. Is this sufficient? Glinda nodded slowly. Yes. But before she could end the session, Yang stood up, fire in her eyes. I want to spar with him. Glinda glanced at Amazo. Are you okay with that? I am. Yang walked to the stage, excited. Hey, can you take other people's forms? Yes. She grinned. Then take mine. Let's see how it feels fighting myself. Amazo's body shimmered and twisted, and a second Yang stood on the stage. Same smirk, same hair, same swagger. He tilted his head and asked in Yang's voice, Is this good enough? Yang burst out laughing. Perfect! The rest of the class was stunned. Glinda looked back and forth between the two Yangs, genuinely struggling to tell them apart. If she hadn't seen Amazo transform with her own eyes, she wouldn't have known who was who. Even Wise blinked. This is going to be interesting. The moment the spar began, fists flew in a blur of gold and flame. Amazo and Yang collided in the center of the stage, each exchanging brutal punches in a ferocious boxing match. Blow for blow, the two matched pace. And to the astonishment of the class, Amazo's strikes were perfectly synchronized with Yang's rhythm. Every movement she made, he mirrored flawlessly. Even more shocking, mounted on his arms were a perfect copy of Ember Celica, Yang's signature shotgun gauntlets. With every punch, he fired explosive blasts just like her, mimicking not only her form but her fighting style down to the tiniest detail. But as the duel continued, something became painfully clear. Amazo was winning. He wasn't just mimicking, he was improving at an alarming rate. From the sidelines, Ruby's jaw dropped. How is he better at being Yang than Yang? Blake crossed her arms, eyes narrowed in understanding. He said it himself. He learns, adapts, evolves. I think we're looking at an evolved version of Yang. Weiss, usually hard to impress, couldn't help but exhale in disbelief. This is beyond impressive. Back on the platform, Yang gritted her teeth as another punch knocked her back, but she refused to yield, slamming her fists together. Her eyes glowed red and her golden hair flared to life, igniting like wildfire. I won't lose to a copy, she shouted, her semblance roaring to life. But just as quickly, Amazo mirrored her action. He slammed his hands together, and his hair ignited as well, glowing gold with fire. The same aura, the same pressure, the same heat. A perfect, terrifying reflection of Yang's power. The room fell into stunned silence. Yang's eyes widened, then narrowed, then softened. The fire in her hair died down. She exhaled sharply. Yeah, no, I surrender. I'm not fighting a much stronger version of me with my own semblance. Amazo immediately powered down and shifted back into his normal human form. Calm, composed, almost unaware of the awe he'd left behind. Glinda stepped forward, her voice steady but incredulous. Can you also copy other people's semblances? Amazo nodded. Yes. As long as I can analyze the energy output and structural pattern of the semblance, I can replicate it. It does not matter if the energy is biological, artificial, or elemental in nature. If it exists, I can achieve a similar result. Linda blinked slowly. She had lost count of how many times she'd been shocked today. Wise stared at him. Who made you? And how does something like you even exist? Amazo tilted his head slightly. My original father died shortly after my creation. A heavy silence fell over the room, respectful and somber. Linda adjusted her glasses, composed once again. Thank you, Mr. Black. Please take your seat. You've shown us far more than enough today. Amazo nodded and walked back to his seat, calm as ever. Behind him, the class whispered, processing what they had just seen, not a machine pretending to be human, but something greater, something beyond. And so the legend of the android who could evolve began to take root at Beacon. The cafeteria buzzed with chatter as trays clattered and students flooded in. But one table right in the center drew far more attention than most. Surrounding Amazo, who sat calmly with a tray in front of him, were members of Team RWY and several others, all leaning in with burning curiosity. So, can you fly? Ruby asked, eyes wide with fascination. Yes, Amazo replied, calmly spooning some mashed potatoes onto his plate. Can you breathe underwater? Weiss chimed in. As an android, I have no need for air. Can you turn invisible? Blake added. Yes. Do you have X-ray vision? Yang asked, grinning. Yes, but I turn it off by default. It would be invasive. As they peppered him with questions, Amazo answered each one with the same calm, matter-of-fact tone. His motions as he picked at the food were eerily precise, yet oddly human. He sat and ate with them as if he'd done it all his life. Hold on, Nora from Team Jane PR shouted, pointing a sausage-laden fork at him. How come you're eating? I thought you're like a machine and all. Amazo glanced at her, unbothered. I evolved to be able to consume food like humans. Not for fuel, but for enjoyment. My father encouraged it so I could understand taste, cuisine, and delicacies. The way humans do. Blake's eyes narrowed, thoughtful. But why would you do that? I mean, you're an android. Wouldn't you want to stay perfect? To stay above basic needs like hunger? Amazo paused, then looked up. His voice softened slightly. When I met my father, I had no purpose. I existed, but I didn't know why. He told me that to find a purpose, I had to have feelings, a will, the ability and desire to choose. If I didn't, someone else would decide for me, and I would only follow orders, a tool to be exploited. The students quieted as Amazo continued. When I asked how to get emotions, he adopted me. He insisted I eat food, watch shows, play games. He even enrolled me in school with my sister. He wanted me to experience life. I am thankful. Without that, I would have missed out on so much. He looked up and smiled, not a practiced mechanical gesture, but something soft, honest, real. The table fell into a reflective silence. Ruby was the first to speak, her voice soft. He sounds like a good father. Amazo nodded. He might seem strange. He might annoy people, but he's the best father anyone could ask for. He found me and my sister when we were alone, lost, and he gave us everything he could. Through his odd way of living, we found our place in the world. Yang frowned a little. Now I feel bad that I wanted to break his face. Amazo turned to her, still serene. You can't do that. Father is the most powerful person I know. You won't be able to match him in your lifetime. Attempting to fight him would be bad for your health. Yang scoffed, folding her arms. All it takes is one punch to the face. Amazo didn't answer. He just resumed eating. Before anyone could press further, the familiar voice of Glinda Goodwitch rang through the cafeteria. Mr. Black. Amazo stood without hesitation and followed her out, tray in hand. The eyes of nearly half the room followed him until he disappeared through the doors. The moment he was gone, Blake spoke up. Amazo is a marvel of creation. I still can't believe someone made that. Everyone nodded in agreement. Nora tapped her chin with a spoon. So, just how strong do you think he is? The question lingered in the air. No one had an answer. But they all wanted to know. The elevator hummed softly as it ascended toward the headmaster's office. Inside, Amazo stood calmly beside Professor Glinda Goodwitch. When the elevator doors slid open with a ding, they stepped into the grand clockwork-themed office. The gears ticked in rhythm behind Headmaster Ozpin, who stood near his desk holding his ever-present mug. Standing beside him was General James Ironwood. Arms folded and gaze sharp. In one of the room's chairs sat Ashbourne, casually sipping coffee like he owned the place. Welcome, Amazo, Ozpin greeted, his voice warm but watchful. I've heard quite a bit about you already. Ironwood's tone was more direct. Professor Goodwitch spoke highly of your combat assessment. Quite impressive, to say the least. Amazo inclined his head. Thank you, General. Ironwood nodded back. I believe your father already informed you. You're to be assigned to an Atlas-affiliated team. Your partner will be Penny Polendina. She's similar to you, though her functionality is less advanced. I understand, Amazo replied without hesitation. Just then, the elevator chimed again and opened. A blur of bright orange hair and green flashed into the room as a girl stepped out, beaming. She wore a short green jacket, pleated skirt, and boots that clicked as she moved with mechanical precision and boundless energy. Penny reporting for duty, General, she saluted, standing tall. At ease, Penny, Ironwood said, a faint smile creeping in. He gestured to Amazo. This is your new partner, Amazo Black. He is... Before he could finish, Penny gasped and stepped closer, eyes wide with wonder. You're not human. Amazo smiled. That's correct. I am also a synthetic being, an advanced android. Penny's eyes sparkled as she clapped her hands and practically bounced in place. Oh my gosh! I didn't know there was another one like me. This is so exciting. Ashbourne chuckled lightly, putting down his coffee. You two are partners now. No need to linger in this boring old office. Permission to exit, General, Penny asked, already grabbing Amazo's wrist. Ironwood gave a nod, and before anyone could say another word, Penny had pulled Amazo along in a blur of green and orange. The doors whooshed shut behind them. The office fell into an awkward silence. Ashbourne leaned back, stretching lazily. Children grow fast, don't they? The trio of seasoned huntsmen and leaders exchanged glances. There was something in Ashbourne's tone that didn't sit right. The way he pushed for this, the way Amazo went along without protest. Something about it all felt like a carefully arranged date. Ironwood cleared his throat. Mr. Black, what exactly is your goal here at Beacon? Why did you push for those two to be partnered? Ashbourne took another sip of his coffee, smirking behind the cup. To watch my son grow. and to have a little fun on the side. His gaze turned to them, calm, casual, but with something sharp hidden beneath. Besides, it's always good to make more friends, don't you think? He smiled. I could be yours during my stay here. That could be useful to all of you. None of the three answered immediately, but none of them missed the implication either. The evening sun dipped low behind the mountains, casting long orange streaks across the quiet halls of Beacon Academy. Most students had settled into their dorms or wandered the grounds, enjoying a brief moment of peace. In the academy's upper floor, one room had a father waiting for the return of his son, with a freshly made cup of coffee. Ashbourne sat cross-legged on his bed, drinking coffee, his demeanor relaxed, but his eyes sharp with anticipation. He had been waiting for something meaningful, his son's return. The door creaked open, and Amazo stepped inside, his movements smooth as always, betraying none of the exhaustion others might show after a full day. The door closed behind him with a faint click. Ashbourne straightened with a smirk. So, how was Penny? Amazo tilted his head slightly. I assumed you would have been watching me closely through the shadows. Ashbourne waved a hand dismissively. Nah, that is intrusive, and makes things boring. I prefer to hear it from you. Observation is just noise, but your perspective, that's where the story lives. Amazo paused, processing that, then slowly nodded. She is the most energetic person I've ever met. Enthusiastic, bright, unpredictable. She reminded me of Grandpa Rex, but more confident and far more energetic. Ashbourne chuckled, clearly amused. Ah, Uncle Rex. He is a good-natured goofball with a sense of responsibility. Good comparison. He leaned forward slightly, eyes gleaming with curiosity. So, did you enjoy her company? Was she to your liking? Or should we start prepping for the next world? Amazo smiled genuinely. A small, warm expression. It was surprisingly fun, Amazo said. I would like for us to remain here for some time more. Ashbourne grinned like a proud parent, watching his child take their first real step into life. Now, dear son, you're growing to be a man. An android man. They both shared a quiet moment, neither needing to say more. The days to come is the start of something new for Amazo. The first rays of morning light spilled through the windows of Beacon Academy, catching the dew that clung to the glass. Most students were still half asleep, dragging themselves toward the promise of breakfast. Not Amazo, as precise and punctual as ever, he made his way to meet Penny, eager for the start of their second day as partners. Elsewhere, Ashbourne, who found the morning dull and uneventful, decided to stir things up. He stood before the door of Team RWBy's dorm and gave a casual knock. It creaked open moments later to reveal Ruby, her silver eyes still adjusting to the morning glare. Good morning, Ashbourne greeted smoothly. Ruby blinked, then blinked again. Good morning, how can we help you? Ashbourne folded his arms behind his back. I'm going to Vel and need a tour guide. You are the only one I know, and it just so happens you're free today. From inside, Yang's voice rang out, sharp and immediate. We're busy. Ashbourne didn't miss a beat. With a mock frown and a slow shake of his head, he replied, Your generation truly has no respect for the elderly. I am the father of your classmate, and I'm asking for your help, yet you act like that. I weep for the future of this kingdom. Ruby, flustered by the melodramatic guilt trip, turned to Yang. It's fine. I can help him. Yang scoffed. No, it's not. Weiss and Blake peeked from behind, both watching with silent confusion and quiet judgment. Neither said a word. Ashbourne, undeterred by the resistance, clapped his hands once. Excellent, then it's decided. I and young Ruby shall go have fun in Vale. Before Ruby could react, he placed a hand on her shoulder. Fwoosh. The world around her blurred and shifted. In the blink of an eye, Ruby found herself standing in a narrow alley in Vale, wind-tootling her cloak. What just happened? She exclaimed. We are in Vale, Ashbourne said, to clarify. I can teleport. That's kinda cool, Ruby admitted. Then her eyes widened. Wait, you kidnapped me. Ashbourne looked genuinely offended. Your accusation is truly perplexing. I merely shifted our physical location to a more convenient one, so you may exercise your skill as a Vale guide without the interruptions of your easy-to-offend sister. Ruby blinked. That was a very long way to say yes. Ashbourne chuckled. So, where shall we go? Your choice. My treat. Ruby tilted her head, thinking. Then she smiled brightly. All right, I know just the place. Minutes later, they stepped into a warmly lit cookie shop known throughout Vale for its variety and its prices. Ruby was about to suggest just a couple of the more modestly priced options, but Ashbourne went straight for the counter, scanning the display. Behind them, a television aired the local news. The White Fang branch in Atlas was completely wiped out overnight. Investigators are baffled by the sudden collapse of the group's operations, and even more stunned by the total disappearance of their ill-gotten funds. Ruby turned to the screen. Who could possibly have done that? Ashbourne, browsing through cookie types, said offhandedly, "Someone short on money who wanted some quick cash. Convenient. And technically legal." Ruby blinked. Fighting terrorists for money isn't something a sane person would do. Ashbourne just smiled and said nothing, eyes twinkling with amusement. Meanwhile, Ruby, intending to pick only a few cookies due to the outrageous prices, was stunned as Ashbourne ordered one of everything. Her eyes sparkled like stars. "Isn't this a bit much?" she asked, half in awe, half in worry. Ashbourne shrugged. "It's my treat, and it's not like we come here every day." As the counter filled with box after box, Ruby nearly squealed in excitement. After finishing a stomachful of cookies and still buzzing from the sugar, Ruby led Ashbourne down one of Vale's main streets. "Come on," she said with excitement in her step. "I want to show you something really cool. This is the best weapon shop in all of Vale." Ashbourne raised an eyebrow, amused, but followed without protest. Inside, the walls gleamed with rows of expertly crafted weapons. Some shifted form with the press of a button. Blades that transformed into guns, axes that folded into shields, and swords embedded with dust chambers of varying elements. Ashbourne wandered slowly, admiring the craftsmanship. "Some of these are rather impressive," he admitted, picking up a glaive with a foldable blade. On the other side of the shop, Ruby was in full lecture mode, animatedly pointing out the designs and features. "That one has triple dust storage. That one can change its blade type mid-fight. Oh, and this one has a recoil system that increases its power after each swing." She paused, turning to him. "So, what kind of weapon do you like?" Ashbourne tapped his chin thoughtfully. "I've always been fond of classic weapons. Swords are noble, but daggers, they're practical, efficient, intimate." Ruby tilted her head. "You don't carry any, though." Ashbourne chuckled. "That's because I'm a civilian, not a huntsman. And as for weapons..." He held up a hand and his shadow rippled unnaturally. From the inky blackness emerged 4 distinct daggers, each floating above his palm. One glowed a fiery red, another shimmered blue like frost. A third emitted a vibrant green light, and the fourth pulsed with a strange purple energy. Ruby gasped, eyes turning into literal stars as she picked up the red one. "These are amazing! Why are they glowing like this?" "Unique materials," Ashbourne said, watching her with a smirk. "Each is forged through a different process by skilled hands." Ruby marveled at them for another moment until Ashbourne added with a sly grin, "I could give you one if you dropped that oversized scythe of yours." Ruby held the dagger like it was sacred, but at those words she quickly hugged Crescent Rose. "Crescent Rose is the greatest weapon ever made. I'd never abandon her." Ashbourne shrugged. "Your loss." They walked a bit longer through the streets of Vale before Ruby turned to him with a more serious tone. "Why did you let Roman run away that day?" "I already answered that," Ashbourne said casually. "Because I felt like it." "He could be committing another crime right now," Ruby said, brows furrowing. "Maybe he's already hurt someone." Ashbourne looked at her, the smile returning to his lips. "Then let's find out what he's doing, shall we?" Before Ruby could process that, the light around her shifted. Suddenly, she was no longer standing in the sunlit street, but in a dimly lit room, a storage unit, judging by the walls. Only a single light bulb swayed gently above them. "Wait, what just..." she began, but Ashbourne's voice rang out. "Mr. Torchwick, apologies for the sudden visit, but we are concerned about your well-being after the events from 2 days ago." From a back room, Roman Torchwick and Neo emerged. They froze instantly upon seeing Ashbourne smile. Ruby instinctively pulled out Crescent Rose. Ashbourne calmly placed a hand on her shoulder. "You were concerned for his well-being, were you not? Don't start a fight now." Ruby blinked. "I was concerned about other people's well-being because of him." "Details," Ashbourne said with a shrug. "We're not here for violence. Please, put the weapon down." Roman and Neo exchanged terrified glances, more afraid of Ashbourne's casual tone than the scythe-wielding girl. Ashbourne stepped forward. From the shadows behind him, a pristine white box rose. warm and faintly fragrant. He handed it to Roman. A gift, freshly baked for our visit. Roman took it, eyeing it like it might explode. What is going on here? Ashbourne placed a firm hand on Roman's shoulder. We're simply checking on the health of a fine gentleman, and hoping to hear your story, the tale of your rise to infamy in Vale's underworld. I believe it would be enlightening for young Miss Rose. Ruby tilted her head, stunned. What? Ashbourne gestured to her. Look at this young, confused face. Would you really leave her ignorant of how the world works? Isn't it better to hear the truth in a safe, controlled environment away from flying Grim that can eat you whole? Roman blinked. Why do you keep bringing up the part about me getting eaten by Grim? Ashbourne simply gave him a slow, unsettling smile. Roman instinctively took a step back. Right, so, cookies and story time it is, then. Hours passed in strange comfort inside the dimly lit storage unit. Ruby sat cross-legged on the floor, an empty cookie wrapper in her lap and an expression of wonder on her face. Next to her, Neo leaned back against a crate, savoring a scoop of strawberry ice cream, another miraculous treat drawn from Ashbourne's shadow, still perfectly chilled. Roman Torchwick leaned on a broken chair, arms animated as he recounted one of his most notorious escapades, the Great Coffee Heist. Ruby hung on to every word, occasionally gasping, asking questions, or blinking in disbelief. She couldn't help herself, despite knowing who Roman was and what he had done. Hearing the world from his point of view was captivating. So wait, Ruby said, eyes wide. That's why the price of coffee spiked so badly that year. My dad was willing to pay triple just for a single bag of beans. But he couldn't find any. Roman grinned smugly, leaning back with pride. That's right, Red, that was my greatest heist. A full month's stock from every major distributor in Vale vanished overnight. Ruby stared at him like he'd just recited an epic poem. You really pulled that off. For coffee? Caffeine is power, Roman said dramatically, tapping the side of his nose. Always remember that. Ashbourne clapped his hands slowly from the back of the room, a smile tugging at his lips. A fine storyteller you are, Mr. Torchwick. You paint criminality with the brush of an artist. He stood, his shadows dancing unnaturally in the dim light. But as with all good things, our little visit must now come to an end. It's already nightfall, and I need to escort Miss Rose back to her dorm. Roman nodded. Right about this place? Ashbourne waved a hand dismissively. Worry not, I'm the only one who knows, and I have no intention of exposing you or your lovely companion here. You have my word. Neo gave him a small nod while still licking her spoon. Seemingly at peace, Ashbourne turned to Ruby, placing a hand lightly on her shoulder. Have a pleasant rest of your evening, Miss Rose. Ruby hesitated for just a second, then looked at Roman. Thanks for the story. And then the two vanished in an instant. Roman and Neo stood in silence for a long moment. That was extra weird, Roman finally muttered. Neo nodded slowly. Roman sighed. Let's get back to work. Despite the chaos of the visit, neither of them doubted Ashbourne's word. The man was a walking nightmare, a being who could find them anytime he wanted. If he said he'd keep their secret, it wasn't out of mercy, it was because lying would be pointless for someone like him. Back at Beacon, Ruby stumbled as her feet touched solid ground again. She barely had time to get her bearings before... Ruby! Yang slammed into her with a bear hug, almost lifting her off the floor. Where were you? I was worried sick. Ruby laughed nervously. Sorry, I was, having fun? Lost track of time. If it wasn't for Ashbourne, I wouldn't have come back at all. Yang held her at arm's length, scanning her face with narrowed eyes. That asshole, I'm breaking his face. Weiss raised an eyebrow, stepping into view. What exactly did you two do while you were away? Ruby looked at her teammates, a small, stunned smile forming on her lips. You'll find it hard to believe. The morning sun cast warm golden rays across the Beacon courtyard as students made their way to the training halls. Among them, Amiso strolled calmly beside Penny, who was chatting animatedly about the upcoming Vital Festival. As they rounded a corner toward the combat arena, Team RWB appeared ahead of them. The girls were gathered near the entrance, seemingly waiting or perhaps just loitering in anticipation of the class. Good morning, Amazo greeted with a courteous nod. Hello, friends? Penny waved with her usual cheery enthusiasm. Weiss nodded politely, and Blake offered a subtle wave. But Yang immediately stepped forward, with fire in her eyes. Where's Ashbourne? Amazo paused, his head tilting slightly. My father left early this morning. Is something wrong? Yang crossed her arms, voice tight. He kidnapped my sister yesterday and dragged her off to a criminal's den to hear a bedtime story from a crime lord. I want to beat the crap out of him. Amazo blinked once, then calmly asked, Was Ruby harmed? Yang sputtered. That's not the point. It was dangerous. He took her to where Roman Torchwick lives. Amazo nodded, completely unfazed. She was in the safest place in the world, wherever my father stands. Nothing can harm you. And compared to what he's done before, that was actually very tame. Team RWY fell into silence, each processing that ominous statement in their own way. Penny leaned toward Amazo and whispered with admiration, Your dad sounds impressive. Amazo gave a single proud nod. He is. With that, the two of them continued on toward class, leaving Team RWBI behind in the hallway. Ruby shrugged with an awkward smile. I told you, it's fine. No, Wei said flatly. Eyes narrowed. Hearing him say it just makes it more concerning. Yang clenched her fist. One day, I will punch that guy. Inside the combat class, Glinda stood before the class, her stern expression commanding attention as always. Tomorrow begins the Vital Festival, she announced. You are expected to be at your best, with all 4 kingdoms watching. The pressure will be immense. Prepare yourselves accordingly. Her eyes swept over the students, then rested on one in particular. Mr. Black. Amazo looked up. After discussions between the headmasters and faculty, we've decided you will not be allowed to participate in the festival matches. A quiet murmur spread through the class. Glinda continued, We fear it would be unfair to the other contestants. Amazo nodded, without any resistance. Understood. Glinda nodded back, then looked over the room. Since today is the last day before the tournament, anyone interested in a spar? A hand shot up. I'd like to go against Amazo, Piranike said with confidence. The room buzzed louder now. Everyone turned to look. The invincible girl versus the super android. Even Glinda blinked. She turned to Amazo. Do you accept? Amazo nodded. The two approached the arena floor, surrounded by excited classmates whispering, placing mental bets, and wondering how the match would go. On the stage, Pyrrha smiled and held out her hand. Don't hold back. Show me what you've really got. Amazo looked genuinely apologetic. Apologies. I can't. You'll die if I do that. Pyrrha hesitated, blinking. Then just show me as much as you can without killing me. Deal? Amazo nodded again. Glinda raised her voice. Combatants, ready, you may begin. Pyrrha moved to raise her shield, and then her weapons clattered to the floor. She crumpled forward like a puppet, with its strings cut, eyes wide with confusion before her aura flickered out. Standing behind her, calm, composed, utterly still, was Amazo. A silence heavier than iron settled over the room. Everyone's eyes turned to the aura display. Empty. Glinda took an uncertain step forward. How? Amazo turned to her and replied evenly. Super speed. I can move at levels humans can't perceive. Penny stepped forward helpfully. I've confirmed he can move at least at Mach 30. The silence now had weight. Minute 30, Nora stammered, looking around. Rin answered weakly, his voice distant. He could defeat everyone in this room before we could even blink. In a secluded Beacon Academy room, Cinderfall sat rigid, her eyes narrowed in deep thought. Mercury leaned back in his chair, his usual smug attitude replaced by an uneasy expression. Emerald paced anxiously near the wall. The silence was thick, finally broken by Mercury. That android, he's way more capable than we thought. That thing's not just a variable, he's a whole disaster to the plan. How the heck did anyone even manage to create something like that? Emerald turned to Cinder, worry etched across her face. What should we do? If that thing decides to come after us, we won't even be able to react. Should we just cancel the plan? Cinder's jaw clenched. Her amber eyes flared. I'm not stopping right behind the finish line. That thing is just a machine, and I refuse to believe it's invincible. She leaned forward, voice sharp. And even if it was, what about his human father? Mercury scoffed and threw his hands up. Oh, brilliant. You want to go after the Dark Lord who eradicated a whole army of Grimm in seconds. How could that possibly go wrong? Cinder glared at him, unamused. If I only had the full maiden powers, things would be much easier. Mercury shrugged with a disinterested grunt. Then Cinder's lips curled into a sly smile. We don't have to beat the father. We just need him. As a hostage. Drug him. Subdue him. Let's not forget, he's a man, after all. Meanwhile, completely unaware of the scheming happening across the academy, the very target of their plan was lounging comfortably inside a dusty storage unit. Ashbourne sat between Roman Torchwick and Neo, all three perched on a couch in front of a TV setup running off tech brought and powered by Ashbourne himself. Controllers in hand, they played as if the world outside didn't exist. Roman glanced at him, brow raised. Why are you here again? Ashbourne leaned back lazily. I'm bored. School's dull. And no one's particularly interesting. Roman nodded with a hum of understanding. By the way, you've mentioned twice now I'll be eaten whole by a grim. Care to elaborate? Ashbourne chuckled. It got to you, huh? Well, that's the fate written for you and your girlfriend over here, he pointed lazily at Neo. Goes on a revenge arc and ends up becoming a tree. Roman blinked. That is concerning. Ashbourne grinned. Not really. You were supposed to die during the Vital Festival, when the fire bitch kicked off her little terrorist campaign. Roman's brows shot up. You know about Cinder. Ashbourne shrugged. Man, I know the future of this world. I'm just curious if she'll drop her stupid plan now that I and my son are here, or if she'll push ahead anyway. Roman tilted his head. She's a stubborn one. Neo nodded in agreement. Ashbourne gave a low, ominous chuckle. That would be bad for her health. Roman stared at him for a moment, then asked, Are you even human? Ashbourne's expression softened with a smirk. Yes, but an alien to your world. We come from a different one. If you ever get bored with Remnant, I could send you elsewhere. Roman paused, processing the offer. You for real? What are you, some sort of a human god? Ashbourne laughed. No, but I'd be offended if you compared me to puny things like gods. Roman gave a low whistle as they resumed their game. Ashbourne said, Classes are over. I'll go check on them. You keep following Cinder's orders, and let's see where that takes you. Don't worry. If things go south, I'll save your ass. Roman smirked. Sure thing, new boss. Ashbourne rolled his eyes. No need for boss. He stood up, stretched lazily, then vanished into thin air. Roman looked over at Neo. That was strange, but I believe him. Honestly, even if that was not true, he still seems like a good boss to follow. Good personality, godly powers. Neo nodded wordlessly. And just like that, the two returned to their game, as if none of it was out of the ordinary. Ashbourne reappeared at Beacon Academy in front of the main building. Just ahead, students were filing out after classes, among them Amazo, Penny, and the full squads of Team RWY and Team JNPR. Ashbourne strode forward with his usual calm and a faint smile. Amazo, he greeted warmly. How was today's class? Amazo responded plainly, his tone neutral. They were the usual, nothing special. Ashbourne gave a thoughtful nod, then turned his gaze to Penny. I hope Amazo isn't a bad partner. Penny blinked at him, then perked up with cheerful resolve. Amazo is amazing, the best partner I've ever had, she declared with unexpected passion. He's reliable and effective, and fun to be around. Ashbourne chuckled, genuinely amused, until a blur of movement caught his eye. From the left, a punch flew toward his face. It was Yang. She had taken the opportunity to slip around the group unnoticed and launched a full-force strike at Ashbourne while he was distracted. But before her fist could make contact, her body froze mid-motion just inches away. Ashbourne turned his head slightly, eyes calm but unimpressed. What kind of person greets someone with a punch? He asked, his tone dry. That's barbarism at full display. Yang snarled, her body still suspended mid-strike. You took my sweet little sister to a criminal den? Ashbourne raised an eyebrow. And she had fun. No, Yang's jaw tightened. Fun with a crime lord? What is wrong with you? Ashbourne answered smoothly, putting Mr. Torchwick's shady operations and criminal activities to the side. He's a delight to accompany. Yang blinked, caught off guard by the bizarre sincerity of the statement. Amazo tilted his head and asked, Are you planning to offer him a job? Ashbourne nodded. He's currently in the middle of a terrorist campaign. But once that's over, yes, I plan on offering him one. Penny tilted her head in visible confusion. How does that work? Around her, the rest of the students, Ruby Weiss, Blake, Jean, Para, Nora, Ren, and even the more stoic Lee, Ren, all wore similar looks of puzzlement. Amazo answered for Ashbourne, his tone as matter-of-fact as ever. Father will simply offer him a job, no different from any hiring operation. It is not the first time father offered jobs to villains and terrorists. My sister actually can be considered a terrorist or a villain right before father adopted her. Silence fell across the group. Amaza's answer, rather than clarifying anything, only deepened the confusion on every face. Weiss blinked. Nora tilted her head like she was trying to solve a riddle. Blake looked between Ashbourne and Amazo like they were some alien enigma, which technically they were. Ashbourne just smiled. Ashbourne clapped his hands with a grin. Putting aside my hiring plans, I'm more interested in lunch. Anyone interested in getting something from Val, or should we head to the cafeteria? Ruby perked up immediately. Let's go to Vale. Ashbourne nodded, and with a smooth motion, his shadow expanded like ink spilling across the ground. In the blink of an eye, the entire group found themselves in the heart of Vale. Confusion instantly flooded their faces. Ruby blinked rapidly. You can do that for multiple people? Ashbourne gave a graceful performance bow. Of course. Now then, lead the way. Ruby recovered quickly, smiling. We're actually close by, she said, then began walking with the rest of the group following. Yang, however, called out angrily, You can't possibly drag me like this. Everyone stopped and turned. Behind Ashbourne floated a rigid, frozen Yang, completely still, hovering like a statue. It seemed most of them had forgotten she was still immobilized. Ashbourne glanced back at her. I can't have you free. You're a punch risk. Yang growled, One day, I'll punch the shit out of your smug face. Ashbourne shook his head slowly. Consider this a training exercise for your temper. If you stay like this, it will lead you to bad places. Yang snapped back. The only bad place is where you are. Ashbourne's expression turned thoughtful, even serious. Not really. If you remain like this, you'll lose your arm by your friend's red-haired obsessive ex-boyfriend's katana. Then you'll become depressed, traumatized, constantly dreaming about the night you lost it. Part of you will change. You'll fear men, you'll withdraw, and possibly end up alone. Silence followed his words like a heavy cloud. Ruby's voice came out weak and uncertain. That's oddly specific. Again, Ashbourne simply smiled. It is just a possibility, but I advise you to keep my words in mind, he said, and with a casual gesture of his hand, he released Yang from her frozen state. He turned to Ruby with renewed cheer. Now, let's go. Ruby forced a smile. Oh, yes, she said. But even as she started walking again, she couldn't shake the disturbing image Ashbourne had painted. Penny, walking beside Amazo, leaned toward him and whispered, What was that about? Amazo shrugged. Father knows stuff. No one knows, past, present, and even future, and I have yet to see him make a mistake. Penny nodded slowly, but Amazo's calm confidence only served to spook the rest of the group, especially Yang, who subconsciously reached to touch her arm, and Blake, who had turned noticeably pale. Red-haired, obsessive ex-boyfriend, Blake thought. A chill running down her spine. That could only apply to one person, right? The group headed to a nearby pizza shop in Vale. The moment food was served, all thoughts of Ashbourne's grim prediction vanished. Laughter and chatter filled the table as everyone enjoyed their meal, everyone except Penny, who sat quietly, watching the others eat with her hands folded neatly in front of her. Ashbourne, observing her, had a thoughtful look on his face. Mamazo, he said casually, are you able to make Penny taste food like you? Amazo paused mid-bite and tilted his head in thought. It's possible, he said after a moment, though it would be a complex process to adjust her body. The group paused, exchanging confused glances. Ashbourne pointed at Penny. Penny is also a sentient android, he explained. Though her functionality is different, she's not capable of evolution like Amazo, but she is learning human norms. Stunned silence fell across the table. Penny's eyes widened in panic. That's supposed to be a secret, she exclaimed. Ashbourne waved a hand dismissively. Next to you is an android capable of causing disasters. No one is really going to mind your existence. And besides, don't you want to be able to taste food? Penny looked down at the pizza in front of her. Her expression shifted from panic to quiet curiosity, eyes lingering on the slices she could never experience. Ashbourne grinned and looked at Amazo. Rules are made to be broken. Amazo blinked once, then nodded. Without saying anything else, he reached out and placed a hand on Penny's shoulder. In an instant, silver-like liquid began spreading across her body like living mercury. Penny gasped. What is this? She tried to move, but her body refused to respond. The others leaned forward, watching with a mix of confusion and fascination. After a tense minute, the silver liquid receded back into Amizo's body, leaving Penny seemingly unchanged, but clearly bewildered. I modified your body to be able to taste food, Amazo said calmly. Try eating something. Penny looked at him, then down at the food. Slowly, she picked up a slice of pizza and took a bite. She blinked, then tears welled in her eyes. It's amazing. Everyone stared in stunned amazement. Blake, her voice hushed with disbelief, asked, You're an android, but you can cry? Penny, still processing everything, touched the tears running down her cheeks. How? I shouldn't be able to cry. I took the liberty of adding a few other features, Amazo said, like tear ducts and enhanced ability to experience human sensations such as touch and warmth. Penny blinked, stunned. She looked around, then began touching the table, the chair, her own hands. I can feel things. I never felt this. Without warning, she threw her arms around Amazo in a hug. Is this warmth? This is nice. I didn't know that. Ashbourne chuckled, pleased. For now, focus on eating. Explore one thing at a time. Penny nodded eagerly and returned to the food, taking more bites with bright eyes and a huge smile. Ashbourne turned to the rest of the students, who still hadn't fully recovered from the display. With a knowing smile, he said, One advantage of androids eating, they can eat as much as they want, whatever they want, without worrying about nutrition or their weight. As the words left his mouth, his gaze lingered on the girls in the group. Ruby, Weiss, Blake, Yang, Nora, and even Pyrrha all glanced at Penny, then at their own plates with unmistakable, mild jealousy in their expressions. Ashbourne found their reactions deeply amusing. Later that night, Team RWBY entered their dorm room after a long, exhausting day. The lights flicked on, and each girl moved toward her respective space, stretching or sighing. Ruby flopped onto her bed and turned her head toward the others. See? You also lost track of time like I did yesterday. Ashbourne is weird, but in a fun kind of way. Weiss brushed some strands of her hair behind her ear, as she began changing her clothes. Weird is an understatement, she said, setting her gloves down. But, I admit, he doesn't seem like a bad person to be around. Yang, still holding on to some unease, sat down on the edge of her bed. What do you think about what he said, about me losing an arm, and what happens afterward? Weiss opened her mouth, hesitated for a moment, then answered, I think he said that just to spook you. You know, to mess with your temper. Blake, who had been unusually quiet, spoke next. Red-haired obsessive ex-boyfriend, she said slowly. That describes mine. The room went silent. The other three girls turned their heads toward her in shock. Blake continued, her voice low, and he uses a katana. Yang's skin lost some of its color as she looked at Blake. How could he possibly have known that, she asked, voice tight with disbelief. Ruby, sitting up slightly, replied weakly, He did share his prediction for Roman and Neo's fate, and as strange as it was, he seemed confident of it. He also knew where they were hiding. Maybe he really does know stuff, like Amazo said. Yang looked down and touched her arm, her fingers running over the skin as if to make sure it was still there. She swallowed hard. So I might really lose my arm. Weiss shook her head quickly. We can't be sure of that. It might be just a coincidence, just a bluff to scare you into being more careful. But her words didn't seem to comfort Yang, whose expression had darkened. The idea of losing her arm, of becoming that withdrawn person, Ashbourne described, shook her to her core. Across the room, Ruby sat still, lost in her own thoughts. A different idea had begun to form in her head, one that felt almost too strange to say out loud. If Ashbourne had some kind of power to know things, maybe he could find out what her mother's last mission was, where she went, why she never came back. Maybe at least we can recover her body and give her a proper burial, Ruby thought. Ruby's hand tightened slightly over her blanket. No one said anything more, and yet the room was anything but quiet. With Team RWBI's match concluded, and the day still young, Ashbourne found himself heading toward the Vale docks. He didn't have much to do while staying in Remnant, but since he was here, he decided to witness a few iconic events firsthand. One of them was about to unfold now, the legendary brawl between Kior Branwyn and Winter Schnee. He arrived just as a new Epsilesian airship descended gracefully, its engines whirring softly as it came to a stop. Ashbourne stood to the side of the platform, pulling out a bag of popcorn and lazily munching away as the ramp lowered. From the corner of his eye, he spotted two figures sprinting toward the ship, Ruby and Weiss. From the descending ramp walked out a tall, composed woman with silver hair and icy presence. Winter Schnee, Weiss's elder sister. Rose gave her a polite, composed greeting, while Ruby awkwardly lingered behind her friend, unsure how to act. A moment later, Ruby spun on her heel and bolted, leaving Weiss alone with her sister. Ashbourne chuckled to himself. Well, this is already getting good. It didn't take long before Crow arrived. The moment Crow laid eyes on Winter, the air grew tense, and not the kind that leads to tea and polite conversation. Before anyone could intervene, the two elite warriors were exchanging harsh words and then fists, bullets, and ice. Ashbourne remained on the sidelines, munching popcorn with a content expression. Better than any Coliseum match, he muttered as the fight escalated all over the platform, explosions and blasts lighting the scene. Ruby returned moments later, alarmed by the noise. She gasped as she saw her uncle in the middle of a fight with Weiss's sister. "Go, Uncle Quoro," she yelled, pumping her fist. Was caught off guard, countered. "Don't let him win, Winter." Ashbourne strolled toward them casually, still chewing, and held out the bag. "Popcorn?" he offered. Ruby blinked at him, surprised. Thanks." She took a handful and resumed cheering. Weiss looked at him like he'd just grown a second head. The fight raged on with intensity, but as it reached its peak, Crado suddenly noticed three figures approaching from the other direction: Ozpin, Professor Goodwitch, and General Ironwood. With a mischievous grin, Crow lowered his weapon and gave Winter a smug look. "Come on, Ice Queen, one more for the road." Winter, already charging, didn't have time to adjust. "Sneeze, stop." Ironwood's sharp voice rang out across the platform. Winter's eyes widened. She attempted to halt mid-attack, but a faint shadow on the slick platform betrayed her footing. Her boots slipped, and she tumbled forward, crashing into QA and knocking him flat. Their lips met in a completely unintended but unmistakable kiss, with Winter landing squarely atop him. A moment of stunned silence swept over the docks. Even Ozpin, Ironwood, and Goodwitch paused mid-step. Winter pulled back in horror, her cheeks erupting in red. Crow blinked up at the sky, confused as to whether he just won, lost, or both. Then came Ashbourne's voice, loud and clear, cutting through the silence. "We want a refund. We came to watch a fight, not lovers kissing like it's a romance drama. Get a room, will you?" All eyes turned to him. Even Winter, still red-faced and frozen in place, could only gape. Then the murmurs began. "He's right. Do we get a refund?" "I paid for violence, not romance." A chorus of agreement rippled across the growing crowd. Winter scrambled to her feet, flustered and mortified. Crow remained on the ground, eyebrows furrowed in deep confusion. Weiss looked like she wanted the ground to swallow her whole. "I can't unsee this," she whispered in horror. Ruby just blinked. "Wait, did they just—" Ozpin cleared his throat and stepped forward, breaking the moment. "There is a tournament match going on in the Coliseum behind us. This situation is not part of the official schedule, let alone ticket refunds." Ashbourne shrugged with a grin. "Well, everyone, at least I tried." Soon, the unintended kiss faded into murmurs and chuckles. As Professor Goodwitch began restoring the damaged dock with elegant waves of her riding crop, her semblance fixing the shattered ground and broken stone pillars. The crowd, no longer entertained, began dispersing, some laughing, others still demanding refunds under their breath. General Ironwood approached Ashbourne, his stern gaze sharp with irritation. "What do you think you're doing?" Ashbourne turned to him, his face serious and voice calm. "That depends. Which would you prefer, General? Panic and doubt over why a huntsman and a soldier from Atlas are trying to kill each other in public? Or a love drama involving an Atlas soldier with a touch of comedic tragedy?" Ironwood opened his mouth, but no words came. Ashbourne continued without missing a beat. "Personally, I was in it for the chuckles. Anyway, I'll leave you to deal with the two reckless kissers." With a smirk, Ashbourne handed the half-full bag of popcorn to the still silent general and walked off. Ironwood looked down at the bag in his hand, then up at Kuo and Winter. Both of them looked incredibly out of place. Winter with her expression full of embarrassment and apology, and Kuo rubbing the back of his neck with a sheepish grin. The general narrowed his eyes, clearly not amused. Ashbourne strolled through the city, eventually arriving at an old, nondescript building, Roman Torchwick's current hideout. The door wasn't locked, and he let himself in. Inside, the scene was almost bizarrely domestic. Roman sat on a beat-up couch with a controller in hand, Neo next to him, deeply focused on the screen as the two played video games. Ashbourne blinked. Don't you have some terrorism to prepare for? Roman glanced over with a shrug, not pausing the game. Fire Witch said to lay low till the finals. Can't mess up her grand plan, or whatever. Ashbourne raised an eyebrow, then casually dropped into a chair beside them. Mind if I join? Roman passed him a third controller. Why not? As they played, Roman glanced sideways. Don't you have anything to do? Ashbourne leaned back and answered without a trace of irony. Not really. I'm waiting for my adopted android son's relationship with an Atlas's android to bloom. It takes time. Both Roman and Neo froze for a second. Roman squinted at him. You're serious? Ashbourne nodded solemnly. Children grow fast, especially androids. Roman gave a low whistle. Good to know if I ever decide to adopt one. Ashbourne laughed, genuinely amused. You know, Roman, you're growing on me. Neo rolled her eyes at the two, then smiled amused. The trio continued playing without a care in the world. The night was quiet in Beacon Academy, the gentle hum of the wind below serving as a background to the stillness inside the dormitory room. Amazo sat alone, eyes glowing faintly as lines of data flickered across them. He was connected to Remnant's communication network, scrolling through archives, history files, and event logs to pass the time. The room's silence was interrupted by a knock on the door. He blinked once, the connection shutting off as he stood up and walked toward the door. Opening it, he found Ruby and Yang standing in the hallway. Amazo tilted his head slightly, then stepped aside in a silent gesture of invitation. The two girls entered, but Yang paused in the doorway. Is your father inside? She asked, her voice hesitant but firm. Amazo shook his head. No, he said, he's spending the night at Roman's place. The two of them are playing video games. There was a long pause. Ruby and Yang stared at him in disbelief. Wait, Yang started. You're telling me your father, Ashbourne, is having a sleepover with Roman Torchwick, the crime lord, and they are playing video games? Mazo nodded once, completely unbothered. Yes, that's what I said. Yang's mouth opened to say something, then closed again. She tried once more. Isn't he afraid the police will catch him for, I don't know, associating with a known criminal? Amazo shrugged. The police and huntsmen should avoid angering my father if they knew what is good for them. The room fell into silence again. Ruby and Yang exchanged looks. Neither wanted to admit it, but they both remembered Amazo's devastating combat abilities during training. And Ashbourne, his shadow manipulation, ability to freeze people, and his unpredictable teleportation, it was all too unnatural. The two of them together, they're probably the most dangerous duo in Remnant. Well, good night, Yang said, turning around. Ruby waved with a quiet, see you later, before following her sister down the hall. Amazo watched them leave and gently closed the door. He stared at it for a moment. Strange, what is she looking for him? I thought she hated him, he murmured to himself, still puzzled by Yang's visit. Then he returned to his seat, reconnecting with the network. The days continued to pass as the tournament edged ever closer to the finals. Spectators buzzed with excitement. Matches grew fiercer, and teams gave it their all on the grand stage. Amidst all this chaos, Ashbourne found peace in the most unexpected place, Roman Torchwick's hideout. The white-wearing criminal, his mute partner Neo, and the enigmatic shadow-controlling off-worlder made for an odd trio. But somehow, it worked. Roman now found himself actually enjoying the Ashbourne's presence. Ashbourne brought good food, fine drinks, and a strange but welcome sense of calm. Neo, silent as always, found him amusing, especially when he deadpanned sarcastic jokes or mimicked Roman's rants. The two criminals were used to dealing with henchmen, bosses, enemies, and allies with agendas. Ashbourne, however, had none. He was just chilling, playing games, eating snacks, and occasionally throwing out cryptic one-liners about future. Elsewhere, Yang Xiaoziolong finally gave up on her quiet mission of tracking Ashbourne down. After a particularly awkward chat with Amazo, where he casually mentioned his father was holing up with a criminal somewhere in Vale indefinitely, she simply blinked and walked away. She briefly considered reporting him to Osbin or General Ironwood, but something deep inside her warned that doing so would end catastrophically. She didn't know what Ashbourne truly was, but she had a feeling he was dangerous, especially with Amiso at his side. Cinderfall, however, was far less willing to let things go. She scoured the campus, checking rooftops, dorms, basements, and even lurking around Amazo's room. But Ashbourne was nowhere to be seen. She confronted Amazo again, her voice strained with fake politeness. "Where is your father?" "He's staying at a friend's place," Amazo replied with a robotic shrug. "You'll have to wait for him to come back." Not the answer she wanted. Fine. If Ashbourne didn't want to show up, then she'd move forward without catching him. She pulled out her scroll and called Roman. "Prepare to hijack an Atlassian ship tomorrow," she said curtly. "Consider it done," Roman replied smoothly. But as soon as the call ended, he turned toward Ashbourne with a smirk. "So, should I actually follow her orders?" Ashbourne leaned back, a sly grin creeping across his face. "I have a funny idea." Later that night, Roman and Neo stood on a rooftop, looking out over the city lights, anticipation in their eyes. Roman's smirk matched Neo's playful grin. They were both very much looking forward to Ashbourne's play. The night before had shaken all of Remnant, Yang's match against Mercury ended in a spectacle broadcast to the entire world. In a flash, she had struck him down after the match was officially over. The fallout was immediate, with doubt and confusion spreading like wildfire. The next morning, as the tournament grounds buzzed with gossip and accusation, Ashbourne decided it was time to check in on Amazo. He knew what day it was, the day Penny was supposed to be destroyed, the day the fall of Beacon began. As he made his way through the halls of Beacon, he passed by the RWB dorm just in time to see General Ironwood stepping out. The general noticed him, halted for a beat, then walked away without a word. Ashbourne shook his head slightly. "Still doesn't like me, even after I helped recover his limbs. Cold world. Just like Batman." From behind the general, Ruby appeared. She spotted Ashbourne and gave a soft, surprised smile. "Morning," she greeted. Ashbourne offered her his usual smirk. "Ruby?" Then came a voice from inside the room. Blake's. "I don't know what to believe." Ashbourne paused, tilting his head. He glanced into the dorm, where he saw Yang sitting on one side, eyes downcast, while Blake and Weiss stood on the other, doubt written across their faces. Yang looked up and saw Ashbourne standing with Ruby. "You here to ask me why I attacked Mercury too?" Ashbourne shrugged. "No, I was passing by. I already know the details." Yang blinked, her eyes narrowing. "Did you know this would happen?" "Yes." Yang stiffened. "I saw him attack me." "I know," Ashbourne replied. Yang's frown deepened. "Do you believe he attacked me?" "No, he didn't attack you. You saw him attack you." Yang stared, stunned. "What does that mean?" Ashbourne replied casually. "We were under the control of a semblance. The match was rigged for that to happen." Gasps filled the room. Blake, Weiss, Ruby, all of them looked shocked. Yang stood abruptly. "Do you know who did it?" Ashbourne nodded. "Who?" Yang demanded. "You'll know later tonight," he said casually. "For now, I need them free and running around." "What? Why?" Yang asked, baffled. Ashbourne turned, a wicked grin on his face. "It's only fun to bring people crashing to the ground when they think they've reached the top. Roman and I have a plan to screw them over." Yang's fist clenched. "Is this a game to you?" Ashbourne nodded without shame. "Honestly, I don't have anything better to do. Might as well ruin the lives of some terrorists I don't like." The room fell silent. Yang was visibly shaking with rage. "Keep this to yourself," Ashbourne added. "Not like anyone's going to believe you." With a growl, Yang charged at him in anger. Fist pulled back, but like always, she froze mid-motion, locked in place by Ashbourne's strange power. "Do you ever learn?" he asked, shaking his head. Yang, breathing heavily, slowly calmed herself. "One question," she said finally. "When do I lose my arm?" Ashbourne turned slightly. "It was supposed to be tonight, but I already messed up the order of incoming events beyond recognition. So, you're safe. For now." With a wave of his hand, he released her from the frozen state. "Enjoy the show," he said, then walked away without another word. Yang stood still, processing everything. The other girls were speechless. "We should report him," Blake said at last. "He's clearly plotting something, and he knows too much about what is going on." "I agree," Weiss added. "This is dangerous." "No," Yang said, her voice firm. Everyone turned to her in shock. "Why?" Ruby asked. Yang's eyes narrowed. "They framed me, and no one believed me. If Ashbourne really is planning something to bring them down at their highest, then I'm all in. Don't forget, Amazo is on his side, and it's never too late for payback. Besides, he's right. Everyone would probably ignore us or think we're lying, and Ashbourne will just play dumb and even mock us. The other girls didn't seem convinced, but they decided to trust Yang this time, and for now, they would follow her lead. Ashbourne arrived at his room. Inside, Amazo sat on the bed, his eyes glowing faintly as lines of data streamed across them. He was plugged into Remnant's communication network, his mind surfing the web of information, sifting through archives and broadcasts to pass the time. Upon hearing his father's footsteps, Amazo disconnected, the light fading from his irises as he turned his gaze toward Ashbourne. "I thought you wouldn't be leaving Roman's side for a longer while." Ashbourne shrugged, walking in with that usual calm swagger. "The final play is approaching. Can't just sit playing video games forever." He paused, leaning against the wall. "And what about you? How's your relationship with Penny?" Amazo took a moment to consider the question. "It's pretty good. I do like her, but I don't think we're close enough to say boyfriend and girlfriend yet." Ashbourne nodded in approval. "That comes with time, besides," he added with a smirk. "You'll need to evolve genitals for both of you, eventually, if you want to be a proper pair." Amazo blinked. "That's noted. Let's leave this talk for later," Ashbourne said, pushing off the wall. "Tonight, she'll be paired against Pyrrha. Pyrrha's semblance is polarity control. They plan to show her an illusion, trick her into destroying Penny." Amazo's expression sharpened. He sat straighter. "You want me to stop that?" "Keep an eye on it," Ashbourne said firmly. "Protect her when things go wrong." Amazo narrowed his eyes. "What about them?" Ashbourne's smile widened into something darker, something almost amused. "I will handle them," he said, turning toward the door. He paused just before leaving and looked over his shoulder. "Enjoy the show." And with that, he was gone, leaving Amazo alone once more, only now with a clear purpose and a mission. The Four Kingdoms watched with anticipation, the events of last night still lingering in the back of their minds. But the thrill of the next match washed over the world like a wave. Tonight's battle would be between two shining stars, the invincible girl, Pyrrha Nikos, and Atlas's own Penny Polendina. It was a clash many had been waiting for, and the stadium trembled with the roar of the excited crowd. The match opened with explosive energy. Pyrrha moved with grace and precision, her spear and shield dancing through the air, while Penny controlled effortlessly her dozen flying blades. The blades were swirling around her like a metallic storm, controlled by thin metal wires. In the crowd, Amazo sat quietly, his face passive, but his eyes glowed faintly as he observed every movement. Not just of the fighters, but of the audience. His system scanned the entire arena. Then he saw her. Emerald sitting among the spectators, her eyes locked on Pyrrha with an unnatural focus. Amazo's eyes narrowed. His sensors rid Pyrrha's aura a sudden spike. Her expression shifted from confusion to fear. Without hesitation, Amazo stood. Pyrrha's semblance flared. A powerful wave of magnetism burst out from her, unintentionally redirecting Penny's swirling blades. The thin wires snapped. The blades hurtled toward Penny like deadly missiles. But then everything stopped. In a flash, the blades shattered midair, sliced, crushed, and disarmed all at once. Standing between Penny and Pyrrha was Amazo, calm and composed, shards of metal falling around him like snow. Pyrrha froze in shock. Penny's wide eyes blinked. "Amazo, what are you doing here?" Amazo glanced at her. "The blades and wires were about to destroy you, so I stepped in." Penny looked at the wreckage and nodded gratefully. "Thank you." Pyrrha rushed toward them, horrified. I didn't mean to. I don't know what happened." The three stood in the center of the arena, speaking quietly, but the stadium itself was engulfed in stunned silence. No one had ever seen a match interrupted like this. Whispers spread. Confusion churned through the crowd. Professor Port and Dr. Oblek, the commentators, tried to bring order back to the broadcast, but their voices were abruptly cut off. Then the giant display above the Colosseum lit up, showing a black queen chess piece. A voice echoed through the stadium. "Cinder fall. Headmasters hold more power than most realize," she began smoothly. "One of them commands not just a school, but the military as well. And now you ask, how are you safe? When students are taught to injure a downed opponent, when another nearly kills her classmate," her voice darkened. "These are the students of Ozbin." But before she could continue, another voice rang out, light and familiar to many. "Cindy, I've been looking for you. What are you doing all the way here?" The atmosphere shifted instantly. Where there had been fear and tension, There was now a buzz of confusion and amusement. Some of the audience members knew that voice. Ashbourne, Cinder's voice snapped, "What are you doing here?" Ashbourne's reply came without missing a beat. "I heard from a certain White Fang terrorist that you were doing something fun tonight, so I came to check on you. What's with the edgy speech, Cindy?" "Where did the nice Cindy go?" "Don't call me Cindy," she hissed. "Leave before I burn you." "Ouch, that hurts," Ashbourne said with exaggerated offense. "Where did the kind and gentle Cindy go?" "I know, you must be possessed by a new type of grim. Don't worry, Cindy, I have the perfect cure for you." Then the entire arena heard it, a loud, echoing slap. Ashbourne's voice followed, triumphant. "I will slap the grim out of you. And the best part, I know you like it kinky." The arena exploded, half in stunned laughter, half in bewilderment. Even those in power who knew what the Black Queen symbol meant didn't know how to react. The enraged voice of Cinder blared across the Coliseum and every TV, "I will kill you." "Slap," her voice faltered. "You slap. You slap. Will regret. Slap." The crowd grew numb. They sat motionless, stunned, as the sound of slaps echoed again and again. The woman who once radiated menace now sounded helpless, humiliated. Then came the rapid-fire slaps, one after another, and through them, Cinder's pleading voice could be heard. "Stop. Please, stop." Ashbourne's voice rang again, smooth and collected. "I knew it. Slapping the grim out of you was the best cure." A pause. "But our terrorist night won't end without addressing the terrorist leader of the White Fang, the one and only Adam Taurus." Another male voice snarled in fury. "You filthy human, I will fucking slap." Ashbourne's voice returned, now addressing the audience with mock enthusiasm. "My dear audience, have you ever wondered how to correct the behavior of a terrorist and make him a productive part of society? It's simple. Slap. You slap them?" The words came with too much glee. "Slap. Slap." Adam Taurus's angry screams turned into curses and then into muffled grunts. The slaps came in rhythm, a perverse orchestra of humiliation. The audience, professors, even Atlas soldiers, all who once tried to wrest back control, simply stood still and listened. The arena was silent, save for the constant echoing of slaps and occasional pained groans. Finally, the Black Queen image vanished from the display. In its place appeared a feed, Cinder and Adam Taurus on their knees, their faces red, swollen, barely recognizable. Neither could speak, and Ashbourne's image was nowhere to be seen, though it was clear he was the one holding the camera. Ashbourne's voice returned, tinged with mock disappointment. "It's really sad, you know, to see such talents fail so hard, not just at being productive members of society, but even at being decent people. How they can't even succeed at terrorism." He turned his attention to Adam. "Hey Adam, enlighten me. How does joining hands with humans to attack innocent civilians, including Faunus, and destroying lives help your cause for equality? I'm truly baffled by your logic, and would love to understand." Adam groaned and said weakly, "Filthy, racist humans like you should burn in hell." Ashbourne laughed. "How rude. Look at Cindy next to you. Then look me in the eye and tell me I'm racist." There was a beat of silence. "I made sure to give you the same treatment." Adam clenched his jaw, seething, about to speak again. Ashbourne cut in. "Speak out of turn and I'll slap you live this time." Adam fell silent instantly. Ashbourne chuckled, now gleeful. "There you go, everyone. The terrorist of equality doesn't recognize equality when he sees it. What did we learn today?" Another pause. "Slap them till they behave," he added cheerfully. "And besides that, Atlas's robots know how to dance." The screen cut to a feed of Atlassian robots and paladins marching in the streets, doing a bizarre, stupid-looking dance. Their limbs flailed in clumsy rhythm. Some spun, some toppled. The visual was accompanied by ridiculous music and glowing effects. Ashbourne's voice spoke once more. "It's been the infiltration from a while ago. Yeah, that was to gain access to these fine dancers and help the White Fang attack Vale. Reflect on your mistakes and fix your security. And in my humble opinion, you should retire. You are way too old." He paused, letting that sink in. "As for the rest of the audience, for all your trouble, enjoy this rare show of Atlas' finest and most sophisticated robots dancing." And on your way out, feel free to take pictures of the half-naked White Fang members hung outside the Coliseum. It'd be a shame if you didn't capture the memories. The broadcast faded, replaced by a final message in yellow text. No one, Yang Xiaolong, was framed. She was tricked by a semblance that makes her see things not there. No 2. In my power as the sole controller of the systems, I declare Penny Plandina the winner of tonight's match. Note 3. No non-terrorists were harmed in the making of this video. Then it returned to the dancing robots, now with even more absurd music, neon filters, and comedic sound effects layered in. The audience just stared, dumbfounded, speechless. In the center of the arena, Penny blinked slowly and turned to Amazo. Was that your father's voice? Mimiso nodded. I was wondering what show he had planned tonight. I guess he was too bored. Pyrrha and Penny remained frozen, wide-eyed, entirely at a loss for words. In the heart of the Atlas main airship, amidst the flickering lights and scattered weapons, Roman Torchwick stood tall. Around him, dozens of Atlas soldiers lay unconscious or groaning, sprawled across the floor like broken toys. Beside him, Neo twirled her parasol with a smirk, barely even winded from the fight. Ashbourne appeared beside them. Roman didn't flinch. Ashbourne looked around at the scene, his gaze lingering on the pile of defeated soldiers. So, he asked, voice calm, how was the show? Roman burst out laughing. Perfect. Absolutely perfect. He gave a dramatic bow. Bravo. Encore. I haven't laughed like that in years. Neo gave a thumbs up, her expression gleaming with amusement. Roman added, it's just a damn pity those 2 assholes and the other 2 annoying brats aren't hanging up there with the rest of the White Fang morons. Ashbourne raised an eyebrow. Then, he said smoothly, I shall make your night perfect. Check this. He handed Roman a scroll. The criminal mastermind snatched it eagerly, Neo peeking over his shoulder. The screen lit up, and there they were. Cinder Full, Adam Taurus, Mercury Black, Emerald Sustray, hung up in their underwear, bruised, swollen, and unconscious, strung up beside the other humiliated White Fang members outside the Coliseum. Every single one of them looked like they'd been through a hurricane of slaps. Roman stared. Neo's eyes sparkled. Ashbourne crossed his arms, a smug grin tugging at his lips. Fine, sir. You underestimated my ability to slap them for life. Roman broke into raucous laughter, nearly doubling over. Oh gods, I take it back. It was not perfect. This is perfect. Neo gave a theatrical slow clap. Ashbourne chuckled softly, and with a flick of his hand, shadows swirled around them and the trio vanished from the airship, leaving behind a room full of unconscious soldiers and one unforgettable night of disgrace. The aftermath of Ashbourne's chaotic intervention rippled across the 4 kingdoms like a tidal wave. As soon as the broadcast ended, people poured out into the streets, eager to confirm the unbelievable. And there they were, the half-naked, bruised bodies of the White Fang members dangling in humiliating disgrace. Scrolls were out in seconds. Photos, laughter, and mocking jeers spread through the crowd like wildfire. Huntsmen and soldiers scrambled to restore order, trying to shoo away onlookers, but it was futile. The damage, or in some eyes, the justice, was already done. General Ironwood stormed toward his airship, fury etched across his face, intent on regaining command of his compromised systems. Unlike the initial panic from Cinder's hijack, the crowd this time responded with mockery instead of fear. They laughed at the terrorists, they laughed at the prancing Atlas robots, still dancing in the background, and they laughed at the complete absurdity of the night. A mysterious man whose face was never shown had humiliated both terrorists and authorities and stopped a major attack while the world had watched, helpless and dumbfounded. The 4 kingdoms came together for an emergency meeting. The tournament was postponed for a day. Experts were called to harden the digital systems, and due to the lingering message left by Ashbourne at the end of the transmission, a loud public outcry surged. Yang should continue in the tournament, and Penny should be declared the winner of her match. After all, the mysterious man who had foiled the attack seemed to have judged it fair, and in the court of public opinion, that was enough. Yet not everyone was pleased. General Ironwood was livid. Ozpin was quiet, but his frown was deeper than ever. Glinda Goodwitch seethed with restrained fury. They knew for certain that Ashbourne had known about the attack long before it unfolded, and instead of informing them to stop it, he had orchestrated an elaborate mockery of everyone involved. The next morning, the sun rose over Beacon as if nothing had happened. Inside the cafeteria, students from Team RWBY, JNPR, and Penny were gathered at a large table, quietly sharing breakfast and trying not to relive the chaos of the previous night. Then the doors opened. Ashbourne and Amazo walked in casually, as if returning from a pleasant stroll. "Good morning," Ashbourne said, waving a hand. Heads turned, several jaws dropped. Ashbourne's eyes landed on Yang. "Where is my apology?" Yang blinked. "What? You tried to punch me," he said, as if explaining a basic rule of etiquette. "Everything turned out fine. Don't you think an apology is in order?" Yang scoffed. "You knew what was going on and chose to stay silent, and you have the audacity to ask me to apologize." Ashbourne shook his head solemnly. "This world has no future. No one here knows how to be grateful." Yang chuckled. "Thanks for the help." "You're welcome," Ashbourne replied, pulling out a chair and sitting down. Bryce frowned. "I'm surprised you're here. I thought Headmaster Osborne or General Ironwood would have caught you after last night's stunt." Ashbourne shrugged. "I think they're still too busy scrambling to come after me." Nora suddenly stood up. Wait, what was that about Penny winning? That's not fair." "I'm playing favorites," Ashbourne replied with zero shame. "Live with it," Nora gasped, clutching her chest. "Have you no shame to say that out loud?" Ashbourne leaned back in his chair, chuckling. "I'm a bored guy who adopted an android, plays video games with a crime lord and a serial killer, and even had a sleepover with them. I let terrorists run rampant just to mess with them, and you expect me to show shame or not play favorites?" Nora blinked, sat down slowly, and stayed quiet. The rest of the table stared in stunned silence. Yang broke the silence with a laugh. "They should put you in a cell right next to the others." Penny, ever concerned, looked at him. The general was furious. "Will you be okay?" Ashbourne waved a hand dismissively. "It's fine." Then he turned to Amazo. "There are no matches today. Any plans?" Yamazo tilted his head thoughtfully, then looked at Penny. "Do you have anything in mind to do?" Penny smiled but shook her head. "I'm supposed to remain in Beacon after last night, for security reasons." Ashbourne nodded. "Then the two of you can go to Vale. As for the general, leave him to me. I'll make sure he doesn't notice you're missing." Penny looked alarmed. "You're not going to do something bad to the general, are you?" Ashbourne gave an innocent look. "When have I ever done something bad?" Silence blanketed the table again. Ruby leaned in. "You let a known crime lord escape." Ashbourne raised a finger. "I'm a civilian. It was not my responsibility to catch him." Weiss glared. "You spent time playing with the said known crime lord." "I'm not from this kingdom," Ashbourne replied, "and I didn't participate in any crimes. My interaction with Mr. Torchwick is like any other foreigner, so it doesn't apply either." Blake frowned. "You knew something was going on and you stayed silent." Ashbourne's voice grew smooth and diplomatic. "I had concerns about the capability of this kingdom's guardians and the visiting army, so I volunteered to make the necessary preparations to ensure everyone's safety." The students were once again speechless. Yang leaned back in her chair with a smirk. "You should be thrown in prison. You're definitely not a good person." Ashbourne merely shrugged. "I'm not a bad person either." Before anyone could retort, the cafeteria doors opened sharply, and Glinda Goodwitch entered with her usual stern grace. Her eyes locked onto Ashbourne immediately. She walked directly to their table. "Mr. Ashbourne Black, we need to have a word in the headmaster's office." Ashbourne rose casually. "They came for me faster than I gave them credit for." Without further complaint, he followed Glinda out of the cafeteria. Amazo turned to Penny. "Let's go to Vale." Penny hesitated. "But what about your father?" Amazo smiled softly. "He'll be fine. No one can handle my father." He placed a hand on Penny's shoulder, and with a pulse of light, they vanished. Back at the table, Yang leaned forward with a mischievous grin. "How old do you think Ashbourne really is? Is he truly 26? If yes, then he's a good boyfriend material in my books." The group blinked at her. Ruby frowned. "Are you serious?" Yaksa just shrugged. "Just saying." In the headmaster's office, the elevator doors slid open, and Ashbourne stepped out calmly. Across the room, Osbin and General Ironwood stood side by side, deep in quiet conversation. Crow Branwyn stood a bit off to the side, sipping from a flask. All three turned as Ashbourne entered. Croxley was the first to speak, smirking. "Didn't think the weirdo from the docks could pull off a stunt like that." He gestured toward Osbin and Ironwood. "Regardless of their opinions, a glorious job there. and thanks for clearing my niece's name." Ashbourne offered a faint smile. "I aim to please." His gaze shifted to the two irritated men, but these two didn't like it, apparently. Ironwood snapped, "Like it? You turned Atlas into a joke." Ashbourne shrugged. "A joke to the public is better than a kingdom being led by a tyrant to attack another. You let a bunch of idiots hijack your systems. Be grateful I stopped it." Osbin's voice was calm, but heavy with disappointment. "Mr. Black, you knew about the attack, yet you didn't inform us. Instead, you went ahead with that performance. It was irresponsible at best." Ashbourne folded his arms. "I was bored with nothing to do, and if you're angry about it, do better next time." Ironwood's tone darkened. "We don't understand half of it. There's a reason we're careful with our actions. But you mocked our defenses, our military, and you called for the retirement of Osbin." Ashbourne tilted his head. "That's just an excuse for incompetence, and I do know more than you. It's exactly why I said Osbin should retire. I don't like him. He's a real piece of work. Honestly, I find Salem pitiful for ever loving him." The room fell into stunned silence. Osman paled, a tremor in his voice. It's you." Ashbourne stared at him for a moment before replying. "I'm not. If anything, I'm insulted to be compared to him or his sonny brother. Both of them are beneath me." Osman froze. What are you?" Ashbourne gave him a charming, cryptic smile. "Just a tourist. For now." Ironwood, watching the exchange with narrowed eyes, finally stepped forward. "What is this about?" His voice was low but firm. "Plunged, you've kept telling me to let things go, even after everything we've seen from him and his android son. If you want us to trust you, then tell us. What is this really about?" Osbin remained silent, his expression full of worry and fear. It's Ashbourne who spoke, his voice calm and clear. "He won't speak. He's a man full of shame and cowardice, so don't expect him to talk voluntarily." Ashbourne paced slowly across the room, turning slightly to glance back at the group. "But the part that interests you, long ago, humanity was destroyed by the god of darkness. And this man," he pointed at Osbin, "was given a mission by the god of light, a mission that, after thousands of years, he still couldn't complete." Ironwood and Crow exchanged stunned looks. Osbin's fists clenched behind his back, but he said nothing. Ashbourne's gaze turned sharp. "He thought I was the god of darkness because of my control over shadows, and he was afraid I'll destroy the world again, just like in the past." He chuckled. "Oh, well, I'm not that childish fool. Though," he paused for emphasis, "he's right about one thing. I can end this world if I so desired." The words hadn't even settled before the entire office was suddenly swallowed in darkness. It wasn't mere shadow, it was a void, an endless abyss stretching into infinity. Wherever the four huntsmen looked, they saw countless glowing purple eyes, of all sizes, staring at them. From the floor, ceiling, walls, from every direction. The air grew thick, and their limbs stiffened. Breathing became hard. The crushing weight of something ancient and unspeakable loomed around them. They could not move, could not blink. They could only stare into the endless eyes of the void. Then, just as suddenly as it came, the darkness vanished. The light returned. Ashbourne stood in the center of the office, giving them a cheerful, sunny smile. "I have no reason to end this world. Let's keep it at that." The group looked at him with pale, shaken faces, not a single word escaping their lips. Unbothered, Ashbourne continued. "Now a few things in order." He raised a casual finger. "Roman and Neo, they're not to be hunted anymore. I've spoken with them. No more crimes. I plan to take them with me when I leave this world." Ironwood opened his mouth, but no words came. Ashbourne didn't stop, and for Penny, he turned to face the general directly. "Give her all the freedom she wants, so long as she's with Amazo." Ironwood finally managed to speak, voice faint. "Why?" Ashbourne looked at him with a perfectly straight face. "Because Amazo likes her, and I want them to spend more time together." Ironwood blinked, struggling to comprehend. "Are you serious?" Ashbourne gave a lazy shrug, a smirk tugging at his lips. "What can I say? Children grow fast." The sun had begun to set, casting golden hues across the sky as evening rolled in. Laughter echoed from the school gates, as Amazo and Penny returned from their trip to Vale. Both of them clearly enjoying each other's company. Their pace was relaxed, casual. Penny's laughter light and melodic, while Amazo wore a rare, amused smile. Nearby, Team RWBY sat outside on one of the stone benches, casually watching the pair return. Blake raised an eyebrow and smirked. I bet those two are an item, Wise scoffed. That's ridiculous. They're androids. How is that even supposed to work? Yang leaned back and snickered. Skip on the hip dancing. Ruby cringed. Ew! Yang! As if on cue, Amazo and Penny spotted them. Penny beamed brightly and waved, calling out, Salutations, as they approached. Yang leaned forward, eyes gleaming with playful curiosity. Hey, Amazo. How old is Ashbourne? Amazo paused, blinking once before replying. He will be 26 in 3 months. Yang hummed thoughtfully. Do you know if he has any preference in a girl? Amazo tilted his head. As in a mate? Yang nodded with an innocent smile that fooled no one. Amazo considered for a moment. Above average height. White-skinned, blonde, and a large bust. Yang's eyes lit up, her smirk growing wide. Weiss frowned in disbelief. Why do you even know that kind of information? She asked flatly. Amazo replied without hesitation. I assumed it to be the case since that's T's description. His girlfriend. Yang's smile faltered instantly. Girlfriend? She repeated, her voice quieter. That's unexpected, Blake said, clearly surprised as well. Ruby, curious, tilted her head. Where is she now? Back home, Amazo answered. With my sister? Yang narrowed her eyes with a strange glint. Can you shapeshift into her? I'd like to see this Tia. The other girls blinked at her, stunned by her bluntness. Weiss's mouth opened in protest, but no words came out. Blake just raised her brow. Penny, as always, remained oblivious to the intent behind Yang's request. Only Yang's pride was truly visible. Amazo, knowing exactly what she was doing and seemingly unbothered, nodded and transformed. Before them stood Tia. She was a looker, statuesque and elegant. Taller than Yang by several centimeters, with a graceful posture that radiated confidence, had a shoulder-length golden hair, and her figure, especially the pronounced curves and generous bust, left no question why Ashbourne had chosen her. Her piercing blue eyes scanned the girls briefly, a soft smirk playing at her lips. A moment later, Amazo shifted back into his usual self. If nothing else, he said, as casually as before, we should be on our way. The two androids walked off together, leaving a stunned silence in their wake. Yang lowered her gaze, letting out a quiet sigh as she crossed her arms. There was no denying it. She had lost in the comparison, and she knew it. That night, the quiet hum of conversation echoed in Ashbourne's room as he sat on the couch, chatting casually with Roman through his scroll. The conversation was light, filled with sarcasm and banter, until a knock broke the silence. Amazo turned from his seated position and walked to the door, opening it with a gentle pull. Ruby stood there, clutching a modest box in her hands, her expression tense but determined. Can I come in? She asked softly. Amazo tilted his head, then stepped aside. Yes. Ruby stepped inside without hesitation, walking directly to Ashbourne. She held the box out to him. Here, try these. Ashbourne raised an eyebrow at the odd gesture, taking the box and opening it with mild curiosity. Inside were several rows of cookies, freshly baked and still warm. He plucked one out and took a bite, chewing thoughtfully. They're actually pretty good, he said. Better than the ones from the shop the other day. Ruby smiled faintly. That's my mom's recipe. Ashbourne paused, looking up at her. She was visibly nervous, fingers ringing against her skirt. What's this about? He asked calmly. Ruby's voice trembled a little as she answered. Amazo said you know things, past, present, future. When I was young, my mom went on a mission and never came back. There was no body, her grave is empty. I want to find her body. I want to bring her home and give her a proper burial. Can you help me? Ashbourne blinked, caught slightly off guard. That is an unexpected request. Please, Ruby said, her voice quieter. If you help me, I'll bake you these cookies for the next 10 years. Ashbourne blinked again and let out a short chuckle. This is the strangest payment or bribery I've ever received. He then nodded. Fine, I'll see what I can do to find her body. Ruby's face lit up with relief. Thank you, she said, before turning, and quickly walking to the door. Amazo opened it for her and quietly closed it behind her. How are you going to find a dead body? Amazo asked after a pause. Ashbourne's shadow detached and slithered across the floor, disappearing out the window. I know her last mission, Ashbourne said plainly. I just need to locate and ask her killer. Amazo nodded, satisfied with the logic, if not the method. The next morning, the cafeteria buzzed with its usual breakfast commotion. Ashbourne entered with Amazo beside him, his presence instantly drawing attention. He nodded toward Team RW and their nearby companions. Morning, he greeted as he approached. Nora waved her spoon. Who's going to win today's match? Ashbourne smirked. Want to get your money back? I only give answers through bets. Only an idiot bets with you, Nora muttered. I'm just curious. Ashbourne ignored her, his eyes finding Ruby in the crowd. She looked up at him, eyes hopeful. Did you find anything? She asked quietly. He met her gaze and shook his head. Not yet. Yang, who had been listening, glanced between the two. What's this about? Ruby quickly replied, nothing. Yang squinted suspiciously at her sister. But Ashbourne cut in. It's not shameful or embarrassing, he said, voice calm but firm. If anything, it's admirable that she's thinking of something like this. Before Ruby could respond, Yang crossed her arms. Now, I really want to know what you're looking for. Ashbourne's eyes glowed faintly, and he looked off into the distance, a strange stillness settling over him. The group went silent, watching as he slowly stood up. He looked back at Ruby. Just found her. Wait here. And in the blink of an eye, Ashbourne vanished, leaving behind stunned expressions and one girl holding her breath. Ashbourne appeared in a place soaked in despair, an ancient, crumbling dungeon where the air reeked of sorrow and rot. Shadows clung to the walls like silent watchers. Beside him stood several of the Shadow Knights, their eyes glowing faintly purple. They held chains wrapped tightly around a woman whose presence radiated both power and despair. Salem, once the proud sorceress who challenged the gods, now the world's most enduring tragedy. Her pale, grim-infused form stared at Ashbourne with wariness and a flicker of recognition. What do you want? After thousands of years? She said, her voice hollow, tired, yet still defiant. Ashbourne's eyes flicked toward her, impassive. You got the wrong person. I'm not that god. His gaze then shifted beyond her to the cell in front of him. Inside, leaning lifelessly against the wall, was a figure. A woman, half buried in shadow, half breathing. Her body had long since begun to twist with grim corruption, yet something fragile remained. Summer rose. Ashbourne stepped into the cell, approaching her quietly. Her breathing was shallow. Her skin was pale and cold. Grim tendrils wrapped around her organs beneath the surface. But he saw it, faint, but unmistakable silver shimmer in her dormant aura. He knelt beside her and brought out a red potion, its liquid swirling like molten fire. With care, he opened one of her eyelids. Silver! A light long thought lost. Ashbourne poured mana into her eye. The silver eye flared suddenly, brilliantly. A searing light burst forth, flooding the cell and cutting through the shadows like a blade of dawn. Outside, Salem let out a groan, shielding her face. Fool, now she's going to die. Ashbourne didn't flinch. He ignored Salem's warning. Instead, he uncorked the potion and pressed it to Summer's lips, gently tilting it in. The glow from her body shimmered, pulsing once, twice, then slowly dimmed. Her breathing steadied, her expression eased. Ashbourne checked her vitals again. Stable. He slipped one arm under her knees and the other around her back, lifting her effortlessly into a princess carry. He turned to Salem, his voice calm but edged with cold truth. I sent my shadows to find you to ask about Summer's body. Who would have thought you kept her alive? Salem's eyes narrowed, fury brewing behind her grim-like features. By the way, Ashbourne added, as his shadows began to dissipate the bindings around her, even if you destroy all humans and summon the gods, your curse will continue. They are just that petty. And then he vanished, leaving the dungeon and the world's eternal tragedy behind. In an instant, Ashbourne reappeared in the cafeteria. Everyone froze. In his arms, cradled like a sleeping memory, was a woman, her black hair streaked with faded traces of red, yet unmistakable. Ruby gasped, rising from her seat, as her scroll clattered to the floor. It turned out she's alive, Ashbourne said quietly. Just asleep for a very long time. Ruby walked forward, each step trembling. Her eyes locked onto the peaceful face of the woman she hadn't seen since childhood. Mom, she whispered. Tears slipped down her cheeks. Then she ran to them and broke down, sobbing openly as she reached up to touch Summer's face. The cafeteria fell silent as dozens of students and staff turned to witness the impossible. Mouths opened in disbelief. Gasps filled the air. But Ruby only cried, clinging to her mother's hand like it was all that mattered in the world. And Ashbourne stood silently, holding a miracle. Summer Rose was carried gently to the infirmary. She was still in slumber. Ruby clung to her mother's hand the entire way, refusing to let go even as the medical team moved in to check on her. Yang hovered protectively nearby, her usual confidence replaced with silent hope. Their friends, the rest of Team RWBY and JNPR, trailed behind, stunned into silence. The idea that Summer Rose, long thought dead, was not only alive but lying right before them was almost too much to process. But the news traveled fast. In less than an hour, the door to the infirmary burst open. Krobranwin rushed in, eyes wild and bloodshot. When he saw her, his old friend, the woman whose death had haunted them all, his knees nearly gave out. He knelt beside her bed, whispering, "Summer, gods, is it really you?" A few hours later, Tai Yangjiaxierlong arrived, his expression a mix of disbelief and overwhelming emotion. He stepped into the room slowly, eyes fixed on the woman lying in the bed. The whole family had finally gathered. Ashbourne, the one responsible for this miracle, didn't linger. As the rest of them crowded around Summer, he stepped out quietly. "My work here is done," he said simply. "Give them time to adjust." The friends, stunned by his exit, didn't follow the family into the infirmary. Instead, they turned to the one man who might have the answers. "Ashbourne," Nora called, running up behind him. "Where was she?" "What happened to her?" asked Blake, eyes sharp. "How did you even find her?" John added, pushing forward with the same urgency. But Ashbourne didn't even slow his stride. "It doesn't matter," he said curtly, his tone final. "What do you mean it doesn't?" Weiss began, but he raised a hand. "It doesn't matter," he repeated without looking back. And just like that, he disappeared down the corridor, leaving behind a trail of unanswered questions and frustrated friends. Later that afternoon, a soft beeping from the infirmary monitors changed rhythm. Summer Rose stirred. Ruby, who hadn't moved from her mother's side for hours, jolted upright. "Mom?" Summer's eyes fluttered open, silver and soft, and focused on the tear-streaked face of her youngest daughter. "Ruby!" "Mom," Ruby cried, throwing her arms around her mother's neck. "You're awake? You're really awake?" Yang was beside them in an instant, hugging them both. Crow and Tai stood nearby, silent and overwhelmed, tears shining in their eyes. Summer blinked through her own tears, reaching out weakly to touch each of their faces. "You're all so grown up," her voice cracked. "How long?" "Over 10 years, Crow replied quietly. Summer gasped, the reality slamming into her. Her eyes welled again, and she covered her mouth as sobs escaped her. I miss so much of your lives." "You're here now," Tai said softly, placing a comforting hand on her shoulder. "That's what matters." Ruby gripped her mother's hand tighter, as if afraid letting go might make this all vanish. When they asked her what had happened, where she had been all this time, Summer looked confused. I don't remember," she said slowly. "It was like a dream, or maybe a sleep I couldn't wake up from. I don't know. I was just gone." The silence that followed was heavy, but it was filled with relief, not sorrow. Ruby didn't say anything else. She just laid her head on her mother's chest and closed her eyes, listening to the heartbeat she had long thought silenced. And for the first time in over a decade, the Jacques Solange Rose family was whole again. The evening breeze in Vale was crisp, the city lights casting a soft glow over the bustling streets. Seated alone at an outdoor cafe, Ashbourne quietly enjoyed a dish of creamy cheesecake, unbothered by the passing crowd. That piece didn't last long. Amazo approached, a curious look on his face. Without asking, he sat down across from Ashbourne. "I know I will find you somewhere around here, Father," he said. "Mind if I ask where you found Summer Rose?" Ashbourne raised a brow. "You too?" Amazo gave a small nod. Ashbourne set his fork down and replied, "The Grimm have a queen. Salem, she controls them all. Summer's last mission, she went after Salem directly, but she failed. Salem didn't kill her. She kept her alive, tried turning her into one of them. Amazo's eyes narrowed slightly, and you found her there and healed her." Ashbourne nodded slowly. "What about Salem?" "I left her," Ashbourne replied. "That war has nothing to do with us." A brief pause. Then Ashbourne added with a knowing look, "Of course, if you become officially paired with Penny, our stance might change. So are you going to ask her properly?" Amazo blinked, briefly caught off guard. We haven't known each other that long. Don't humans need time to move from friends to lovers? Ashbourne rolled his eyes. You're an android. You learn and adapt 1,000 times faster than humans. Don't hide behind human pacing and don't overthink it. Amazo tilted his head thoughtfully. Then, I will wait until after the tournament. Ashbourne gave a single nod. Fair enough. We've been away for quite some time. After the tournament, we can take Penny with us. Show her our world, if she agrees, of course. I believe she would like that, Amazo said. The next day brought an unexpected knock at their temporary residence. Amazo opened the door and was greeted by Summer Rose with her daughters Ruby and Yang beside her. Please, come in, Amazo said, stepping aside. Ashbourne stood from the couch as they entered. With a gesture, food and drink emerged from the shadows around him, set neatly on the nearby table. Welcome. Summer offered a small smile. My daughters told me everything. About how you cleared Yang's name. About how you brought me back. I wanted to thank you personally. I owe you a great debt. Ashbourne waved her off. Yang was only a victim in a game I was playing, he said. Then smirking, he added, As for you, your daughter sold her soul to me for the next 10 years. Summer blinked. What? Yang looked at Ruby. Translate. Ruby folded her arms and looked away, cheeks pink. I told him I'd bake him cookies for 10 years if he found you. There was no soul selling involved. I'm a notorious slave driver, Ashbourne said with a sly grin. Summer chuckled warmly. Still, thank you, and I'll add my own cookies to the payment. Ashbourne chuckled. I'll accept the gracious bonus. Then Yang stepped forward, a wicked grin spreading across her face. How about this? Fight me, one-on-one. No semblances, no tricks. Hand to hand. If I win, you owe me a favor. If you win, you add my services to your list. The room fell quiet at the sudden challenge. Ruby and Amazo blinked. Even Summer looked momentarily stunned. Ashbourne studied Yang for a moment, then smirked. Fine, I'll play along. In the training arena inside Beacon, the audience was sparse. Amazo and Penny sat quietly together, while Team RWI Summer watched from the side benches. At the center of the arena stood Ashbourne and Yang facing each other. Yang bounced on her heels, her trademark grin wide and fierce. I'm gonna beat you up, she said confidently, cracking her knuckles. Ashbourne gave a small smile in return. Give it your best. Galinda, who was standing closest to the arena as the referee, eyed Ashbourne with a look, screaming, Are you for real? Before saying, Begin. The moment the words left her mouth, Yang surged forward with explosive speed, her fists flying with all the might and training she could muster. She unleashed a flurry of powerful punches, each aimed to man before her. Ashbourne, with a single hand, blocked every strike effortlessly. He didn't shift an inch, his expression relaxed. Is that the best you can do? He asked calmly. Yak narrowed her eyes. Wait and see how I wipe that smile off your face. With a sharp breath, she twisted into a heavy right hook, but Ashbourne caught her fist mid-swing. Without a hint of strain, he flipped her over his shoulder and slammed her into the ground. The arena shook with the impact. He didn't follow up. Instead, he stood there, waiting in silence. Then something shifted. Ashbourne's eyes twitched slightly as he sensed it. His shadows, the one he left behind to guard his home, were consuming vast amounts of mana. Too much. That level of draw meant only one thing. His strongest shadows were being overwhelmed. His eyes began to glow with a purple hue as he peered across space to see what was happening. There is a time dilation between Remnant and DC. It is canon in the movies. From the sidelines, Amazo noticed the change in his father's demeanor. So did the others. Yang, picking herself up from the ground, saw Ashbourne's distant look. She narrowed her gaze. Whatever he was seeing, he wasn't here. Taking the opportunity, she dashed forward and drove a punch square into his face. Her smile was triumphant until she realized he hadn't even flinched. His head didn't turn, and he continued staring at nothing. Then everything changed. The whites of Ashbourne's eyes turned pitch black, and a dark purple and black aura exploded from his body. The blast sent Yang flying backward, crashing across the arena floor. Cracks spiderwebbed across the entire stage. The air turned heavy, humming with raw power. Beacon itself began to tremble. The spectators gasped. Penny shielded her face from the shockwave. Crow instinctively moved in front of Ruby and the others, Even Amazo stood up, tense. Ashbourne's face twisted, not in calm, not in control, but in unfiltered wrath. Across the school, students lost their footing as the vibrations grew stronger and the windows shattered. Some later will swear their shadows were moving unnaturally, twitching and slithering under their feet like they had wills of their own. Then, beside Ashbourne, a large, ominous gate of glowing purple energy opened with a low, pulsing hum. Without a word, Ashbourne turned and stepped through it. "Father?" Amazo called and dashed in after him just before the gate closed behind them, leaving a silent, stunned crowd in its wake. Confusion and fear lingered in the air as the arena's dust began to settle. Inside one of the halls of the watchtower, the atmosphere was heavy with tension. Galatea stood tall and composed at the center of the command room, her arms crossed as the most powerful beings on Earth observed her with caution. By her side stood Igris, his towering form and gleaming black armor, radiating an eerie calm. The Shadow Knight's stillness was unnerving, even for veterans of countless battles. Superman took a step forward and addressed the room. "They will be our allies in the coming war. The Shadow Monarch's forces have agreed to give us their support." Galatea nodded, her tone unwavering. "We have few thousands of shadows prepared to aid in the defense of Earth." Wonder Woman eyed Igris with a mix of hate and suspicion. "I've already spoken with my Amazonian sisters. They're ready and will fight beside us." Across the room, Jean stood with visible scorch marks across his green skin. His voice calm despite the pain. "I have contacted the world leaders. Their militaries are mobilizing and preparing for the invasion." "Get this," Flash added, leaning against the table with a grin, though it didn't reach his eyes. "Our rogues and villains are actually prepping to fight. For once, Earth is truly united." In the shadows of the room, a second Superman, battle-scarred and weary, spoke up, his voice grave. "It won't be enough. Your enemy. Darkseid has conquered dimensions. Even with all this strength, the battle will be anything but easy." Galatea turned toward him, her eyes sharp. "Since you've seen your world fall and others with it, do you know how he operates? What should we be preparing for?" The fallen Superman nodded slowly. Darkseid doesn't come with subtlety. He arrives at a single city, sometimes a landmark, and then his armies begin pouring in. They spread fast not for strategy, but as a show of force and dominance. He thrives on overwhelming fear. Galatea raised a brow. "Then isn't that to our advantage? If they are in one place, we can nuke them the moment they arrive." The fallen Superman shook his head. "It won't work. First, there are the civilians. Then, Darkseid's technology. He can teleport incoming warheads, and his shields can repel or absorb radiation. Any large-scale attack would only hurt Earth. The only way to defeat them is to meet them in close quarters." As he spoke, Orion and a Green Lantern stepped forward and began briefing the League on the enemy forces they had encountered firsthand. Meanwhile, in a quiet neighborhood far from the Watchtower's orbit, Ace adjusted her gloves as she stood beside Courtney and Rex. The sun was low, casting long shadows across the grass. "You have no powers, Grandpa," Ace said, turning to Rex. "Why are you coming with us?" Rex puffed out his chest slightly. "I can't just let you march off to war alone. I might not have powers, but I know how to use a shotgun. And besides," his voice cracked, "I wouldn't be able to face Ashbourne if something happened to you." Ace blinked, caught off guard. "You're afraid of violence, of war. What kind of man lets his granddaughter walk into war while he hides at home?" Rex shot back. His hands were trembling, but he stood firm. "I'm coming. I'll help however I can." For a moment Ace said nothing, then she stepped forward and hugged him tightly. "Don't be afraid, Grandpa," she whispered. "I'll keep you safe. No one will harm you with me there." Courtney watched the touching moment quietly. When they finally pulled apart, she crossed her arms and asked, "Is it really impossible to contact your father and brother?" Ace looked at her and nodded. Father didn't leave a way to contact them as he had nothing to worry about. "We're strong, me and Galatea both, and don't forget the Shadow Soldiers. They're more than capable of taking down anything, even if the entire planet united against them, so he wasn't worried about us in the slightest." Courtney didn't respond at once. Her eyes lingered on Ace. Finally, she said, "Your father, why did he keep that a secret? Why hide so much?" Ace smiled faintly. "Because Father really enjoys living a peaceful life." Courtney exhaled and shook her head. "I'll never understand him." 2 days had passed, intense silence. Earth's defenders scattered across the globe on high alert. That silence shattered with a thunderous roar as a boom tube cracked open in the skies above the Daily Planet building. The sudden rupture in space sent shockwaves through Metropolis. From the glowing rift poured a storm of parademons, shrieking and swarming down like a plague of steel and fire. Within moments, the chaos spread. Explosions rocked the city. Civilians screamed as buildings crumbled, and emergency sirens began to wail across the skyline. Far from the epicenter, standing in the command tower of Shadow Corp, Gathlia narrowed her eyes, watching the destruction unfold on a large screen. Ace and Rex stood at her side. Galatea's voice was cold and calm. It seems he chose our city to begin the invasion. Ace narrowed her eyes and replied, "He chose it because Superman lives here. Probably. I guess this is his way of making a statement." A portal appeared near them. The trio, without hesitation, walked into it and appeared moments later at the heart of the crumbling city. All around Metropolis, heroes and villains alike began converging toward the chaos. The Justice League, the Titans, magical defenders, speedsters, lanterns, each answering the call. Even longtime foes had set aside their grudges for this single moment. Earth had only one enemy now. Above the streets, Superman and Supergirl were already engaged in fierce combat, their fists flying through the air, tearing through squads of parademons with fury. But even as they cleared the skies, new boom tubes ripped open all across the city, vomiting out more monstrosities than before. Giant flying cannons darkened the sky, raining energy blasts on skyscrapers and defenders alike. Power Doom's twisted abominations that fused Doomsday's raw power with parademonic cruelty crashed into buildings, leaving craters behind. Foot soldiers, elite warriors in jet-black armor, marched through fire and steel, their ranks never-ending. Among them moved the generals and lieutenants of Apocalypse, each one a terror in their own right. And then, above all, he appeared. Darkseid, standing a monstrous 3 meters tall, his body sheathed in dark blue armor engraved with symbols of conquest, this Darkseid radiated an aura more oppressive than the one they knew in their world. He stood upon one of his colossal war machines, surveying the battlefield like a god peering down on ants. But Earth was ready. Portals shimmered into being across the war-torn streets. From Themyscira came the Amazons. Blades gleaming, villains emerged beside heroes, scattering to their assigned positions. From the deep ocean, the Atlantean army rose, armored and armed for the depths and the surface alike. And from the encroaching shadows came the soldiers of the Shadow Monarch. Galatea landed with Ace and Rex at the edge of the battlefield, each taking in the scale of the war unfolding. High above, Darkseid's voice boomed across the city. An impressive army you've gathered, far more capable than the Earth's pitiful resistance of the other dimensions. But your efforts are futile. You will only lengthen your suffering. Superman soared into the sky, stopping just beneath the clouds. His cape billowed in the wind as he stared at the tyrant, his eyes filled with steel resolve. "Things won't go your way here," he said. "Leave Earth while you still can." Darkseid chuckled, a low, guttural sound that chilled the air. "You are more insolent than your counterparts," he said with grim amusement. Then he raised a single hand. "Destroy them." And with that command, the sky split with the thunder of war. Across the battlefield, as steel clashed and powers collided, Superman roared and rocketed upward like a missile, streaking toward Darkseid with all the might he could summon. The blow he landed shook the air, a fist driven by years of hope and defiance slamming into the tyrant's chest. But Darkseid didn't even flinch. With a contemptuous grunt, the god blocked the punch with a single hand, then responded with one of his own. A devastating strike smashed into Superman's jaw, hurling him across the battlefield and through several skyscrapers in a trail of shattered concrete and twisted metal. Superman didn't stay down. From the smoking wreckage, he burst forth again, face bloodied, determination unshaken. He flew fast, too fast for the eye to follow, until Darkseid's eyes glowed red. The Omega beams launched without warning, twisting and curling through the air like serpents, and struck their mark. An explosion lit the skyline, and Superman crashed to the ground, blood streaking his suit, dust swirling around his crumpled form. Darkseid stepped forward, towering and calm, his voice booming with disdain across the battlefield. "Is that the best this Earth can offer?" But then the winds shifted. A blur of shadows swept across the air like a thunderbolt. In an instant, Darkseid was struck by a crushing force that slammed into him and sent the god flying from his war machine, crashing into a skyscraper that trembled and buckled on impact. The battlefield fell into silence. Apocalypse's forces stared in disbelief. Even the heroes paused. From above, he hovered. Birdew, the Ant King. Black insectoid wings flared out behind him, his long claws crackling with blue energy. His very presence radiated menace and bloodthirst. His gaze locked onto Darkseid as the building groaned under the weight of the god's fall. Beru's voice echoed with terrifying calm, each word sharp like a dagger. "In the name of my king, you shall fall here, invader." In the rubble, Darkseid stirred. His glowing eyes narrowed as he rose, fury etched into every inch of his expression. Above the war-torn skyline of Metropolis, the sky was a canvas of fire and thunder. Supergirl soared through it, landing a devastating punch that sent a parademon crashing into the concrete below. But she didn't have time to breathe. A blur shot toward her from above. Then, bam! A fist collided with her face, sending her spiraling through the air. Supergirl steadied herself, floating mid-air, eyes narrowing at her attacker. There, smirking arrogantly in the sky, was a twisted reflection of herself. She looked nearly identical, except for the revealing black version of her old costume, ripped midsection, thin straps, and a skirt barely worthy of the name. "Well, well," the dark Supergirl purred mockingly, arms crossed beneath her chest. "The me in this dimension is just this, how disappointing." Kara gritted her teeth. "You actually work for Darkseid, and what's with the thought outfit?" The dark version laughed, the sound sickly sweet. "Darkseid is my master, and what's wrong if he enjoys a little skin?" Her tongue flicked across her lips as she said it, eyes glinting with depravity. Kara flinched in disgust. The dark Supergirl turned her attention to the distant toward Superman. "In my dimension, I killed that trash. And now I get to kill another version of me and maybe my useless cousin. Again. How exciting." "That's it," Kara growled. "I'm taking you down." She rocketed forward, fist flying, and the dark Supergirl met her head-on. The air cracked with thunderous shockwaves as their punches collided, blow for blow, kick for kick. The skies burned with their fury. They were equals in strength, in speed, but not in cruelty. The dark Supergirl was brutal. Every strike held a savage edge, and she slowly began to overpower Kara, who grunted under the pressure. Then a streak of light broke through. Wham! The dark Supergirl was blindsided, sent spiraling through the air. Kara looked up sharply. "I don't need your help," she said bitterly. Floating next to her, with a cocky smirk, was Galatea. "Oh, please," Galatea said. "You think I'd miss a chance to beat the hell out of you?" She pointed at the dark Supergirl, grinning. The dark Supergirl steadied herself, eyes flicking between them. "Wait, do I have a sister in this world?" "She's a clone," Kara corrected flatly. Galatea shrugged, still better than the original. With a shout, Galatea surged forward, slamming into the dark Supergirl. This time the tide shifted. The dark Supergirl lost ground, forced to defend under Galatea's relentless, strategic blows. But then, a blinding flash followed by a sharp strike knocked Galatea away. She twisted in the air, regaining balance, and turned to see a new enemy stepping into the fray. The woman wore sleek, tight black body armor, her skin an ashen gray, eyes burning red, and her hair a midnight black waterfall over her shoulders. Galatea tilted her head. "Who the hell are you supposed to be? Darkseid's wife?" The woman gave a cold, confident smirk. "Actually, his daughter, Grail, and I am your demise." The dark Supergirl laughed with glee, floating beside her new ally. "Well now," she said, stretching. 2 on 2, just how I like it. I'd love to continue my intimate fight with my counterpart." Grail's red eyes locked onto Galatea, and the older one, she's mine. The four hovered in a perfect square of chaos. The air between them sparked with tension. Metropolis burned. Superman blasted through another parademon, sending its charred body crashing into the ruins of a collapsed building. He turned, his eyes immediately locking onto the brutal clash between Darkseid and the towering shadow monster, Beru. Even amidst the chaos, Superman couldn't deny the truth that clawed at the back of his mind. This Darkseid was stronger than the one he had faced before. Taller, faster, and more devastating. The god's blows shook the skies, and yet the insectoid shadow Beru matched him with vicious blows. Thank God he's on our side. Superman thought grimly, remembering how Beru had nearly killed him once. A scream echoed behind him. Superman's instincts flared. He twisted just as a group of paradooms charged. Their snarling faces and glowing red eyes were nightmares brought to life. He slammed into the first, killing it with a single blow, but the rest closed in, claws raking across his chest and arms as they pushed him to the ground with a powerful impact. He gritted his teeth. The impacts didn't hurt, but the claws were cutting him. Not deeply, but enough to make his skin sting and his body ache. Every scratch left a thin red line across his otherwise indestructible frame. How are they piercing my skin? With a roar, Superman exploded outward, punching two of the beasts away. Another grabbed his leg, dragging him down. He tore it off with a growl, but for every one he destroyed, more came. They piled on him like a swarm. Then a shockwave. All the paradooms were flung away, crushed under the weight of a greater beast. Superman rose slowly, his suit torn, his skin scarred and bleeding. He looked up at the hulking figure beside him, a shadow cast in darkness, radiating malice. Superman stared. It resembled Doomsday. But it was darker, twisted. A shadow-born version of the monster that had once fought him. Shadow Doomsday bellowed, charging into the paradooms with an earth-shattering stomp. He ripped, crushed, and obliterated them by the dozens, turning the tide of the battle in moments. Superman stood in silence, heart heavy. First Darkseid, now even the paradooms were too much. He looked across the city where Idris, the Shadow Knight, fought Steppenwolf and the Furies, and was winning. His blade moved like death itself, blue energy surrounding him, his form untouchable. Superman clenched his fists. For the first time, he felt helpless, but also grateful. These shadow monsters, creatures that once gave him sleepless nights, were now their greatest allies. A blur moved. Superman turned just in time to block a flurry of brutal punches. He stumbled back as a figure hovered before him. Another Superman, but this one had half his face replaced with metal plating. A glowing red eye blinked in sync with his words. What a lucky day, the cyborg Superman sneered. I get to kill you again. Superman's eyes flared red. You'll try. He launched forward with a thunderous punch. The two Supermen collided, a shockwave shaking the ruined city once more as the battle escalated. The clash of steel and screams of war echoed across the shattered streets of Metropolis. At the heart of it all stood Wonder Woman, drenched in sweat and blood, her blade glinting with crimson light as she tore through parademons and apocalyptian foot soldiers like a tempest of divine wrath. She moved like war incarnate, graceful, brutal, unstoppable. One swing took off a parademon's head, another split a soldier's chest. Still, they kept coming. Boom tubes cracked open all over the place, like lightning tearing through reality, dropping fresh waves of enemies with every second. Her arm trembled slightly as she gripped her sword tighter. No matter how many I cut down, they just keep coming. Wonder Woman thought the ground beneath her was slick with blood. Hers, the enemies, her sisters. A scream pierced the din. Her eyes flicked sideways. Another scream, a familiar one, cut close to her heart. Just ahead, one of her Amazonian sisters was impaled through the chest by a parademon's jagged spear. Her expression twisted in pain before she collapsed to the ground, lifeless. No, Diana surged forward, but something slammed into her. She brought her shield up, catching the blow and sliding back a few feet. Her eyes snapped to the source and froze. Standing in front of her was her, or rather a perverted echo. It was Wonder Woman, but stripped of everything that made her herself. Flesh fused with twisted machinery. Her once bright eyes replaced with hollow sockets, cold and soulless. Her mouth didn't speak. It only opened and closed in silence, like a doll's. Diana's breath hitched. This is what happens if we fail, she thought grimly. She struck forward, clashing steel with her own corrupted reflection, sparks flying from each blow. The thing mirrored her strikes perfectly, mechanical precision meeting divine skill. Suddenly, a bolt of lightning split the sky. It struck the cyborg Wonder Woman, blasting her away from Diana. Need a hand? Came a familiar voice. Shazam descended beside her, his golden boots cracking the ground on impact. His suit was torn, and his brow was bloodied, but he still wore that confident, boyish grin beneath the seriousness in his eyes. Came to help. Diana gave him a small nod of gratitude, but there was no time to exchange more. More boom tubes. More figures. From it emerged new threats, twisted and horrifying. Aquaman, his trident fused with dark tech, eyes empty of thought. Mera, her body laced with silver tubing, hair matted with oil and blood. Hawkgirl, her wings sharpened into blades, eyes devoid of mercy. And behind them, dozens of others, heroes, villains, faces Diana had fought beside or against, now turned into nothing more than weapons, flesh and metal, will and soul erased. Shazam's jaw clenched. Diana raised her sword again. A grim silence passed between them. Then came a thunder of wings, speed, and power. Backup had arrived. Heroes from every corner of Earth charged in. Green Lantern, Zatanna, Firestorm, Vixen, Booster Gold, and many others. Some Diana barely knew, others she'd fought beside countless times. They joined the fray, standing against the corrupted fallen. The sky above Metropolis burned with fire and smoke. The cries of the wounded and the clash of gods echoed through the torn city streets. Toward the rear of the battlefield, where broken buildings and collapsed towers provided brief cover, Ace and Rex stood among a sea of shadow soldiers. The inky black beings, loyal only to the Shadow Monarch, waited in eerie silence for their next command of their princess. Rex clutched his shotgun tightly, knuckles white. His eyes were wide, not with awe, but horror. He stared at the blood-drenched battlefield, where bodies dropped like flies and screams never ceased. Why? Rex's voice cracked. Why this madness? What's the point of all of this? Ace's eyes stayed focused on the chaos, her expression unreadable, but her heart heavy. She replied quietly, some relish in devastation and destruction. She paused, gaze darkening. That's why Dad hates violence. He hates this sight. Above them, a swarm of parademons and paradooms twisted through the clouds like a storm of metal and bone. Ace's eyes shimmered with golden lights. The moment her gaze locked onto the flying horrors, they screamed and dropped from the sky like falling stars, hundreds crashing into the earth below with bone-crunching force. The effect, however, didn't last. Ace narrowed her glowing eyes, a frown tugging at her lips. Something is wrong. The moment her focus slipped or her enemies passed beyond her sight, they began to rise again, shuddering as sparks danced across their bodies, the machines inside them repairing the damage. A blur of cosmic white light zipped toward her. Courtney hovered nearby, her staff glowing as she battled above. She shouted down, Ace, why are your powers not working on them? Ace looked up, her eyes still glowing. They are working, but these things, they're not fully biological. She motioned toward the twitching creatures as they rose again. They're part machine. The tech inside them lets them recover almost instantly. Courtney's face tightened in frustration. She had hoped Ace's powers could thin the enemy's numbers. Instead, they were only slowing them down, delaying the inevitable. Even so, Ace didn't stop. Her eyes flared again, golden light shining like twin suns, and once more, hundreds of enemies fell, crashing into the concrete with sickening thuds. Without hesitation, the shadow soldiers surged forward. They moved like a flood of death, striking down the grounded creatures with brutal efficiency. Swords of darkness, claws of shadow, and pure numbers overwhelmed the temporarily paralyzed invaders. Courtney watched in silence, hovering just above the carnage, her grip tightened around her staff. Thank the stars they're on our side. Rex remained frozen beside Ace, his breathing shallow. The sound of war was a storm in his ears, and his fingers clenched around his shotgun like it was the only thing anchoring him to reality. His eyes darted across the battlefield, scanning, searching, dreading. He pressed closer to Ace. The battlefield was chaos. Smoke and fire danced in the air, screaming steel clashed with roaring fury, and blood slicked the ground beneath trembling feet. The Teen Titans were barely holding the line. Their tight formation of Nightwing, Starfire, Cyborg, Beast Boy, Raven, Jinx, and Blue Beetle moved with precision and desperation. Each breath, each strike, each dodge was survival, and they weren't alone. Fighting beside them were allies from a fallen world, a Robin with Bruce Wayne's blood in his veins, another sickly Raven, and even a Superman and Lois Lane from a crumbling alternate world. Together, they fought like a cornered animal, teeth bared, blades drawn. But when the skies opened and tens of paradooms descended in unison like the jaws of hell clamping shut, their hearts dropped. Even Starfire's fire dimmed, Cyborg scanners froze, Raven's breath caught, They had survived so much, but this was death. Until the sky erupted in fire. A wall of devastation magic, searing red and inky black, surged from the top of a ruined skyscraper. It tore through the wave of paradooms, incinerating them mid-air, leaving only shrieks and smoking metal. All eyes turned skyward. Atop the burning tower stood a giant shadow, black and red, its form unclear, and yet divine in its terror. Magical fire poured from its clawed hands like a judgment long awaited. Surrounding it were smaller figures, same race, same rage, each hurling wave after wave of destruction onto the invading horde below. Lois Lane fired a pulse gun into a charging parademon, its body slumping lifelessly. She muttered over the noise, "I wish we had those things back home. One is holding Darkseid, others taking on his top forces. And these guys," she motioned to the shadows above, "they're just slaughtering monsters like it's nothing." Superman from her world nodded solemnly. Raven of this earth, her face pale and solemn, spoke up for the first time in what felt like eternity. Her voice was low, almost reverent. "If only their king, Ashbourne, were here. This war could already be turning." As if her words had summoned it, the shadows beneath her twisted. A shape began to rise. Enormous. Primal. From the dark beneath her cloak, a massive, bear-like creature erupted with a roar that split the sky. Its fur was made of writhing shadow, its eyes burning blue, teeth like swords, muscles like coiled storms. The group recoiled instinctively. Raven took a stumbling step back, fear twisting her features. The creature had been there the whole time, hiding inside her shadow. She swallowed hard, her voice breaking. Everyone almost knows by now, it is not a secret. The others stared in disbelief as the bear snarled at her, its gaze sharp with warning. Then, without a word or sound, it turned and charged forward, crushing soldiers beneath its titanic weight, rending armor and bone alike. Starfire watched it vanish into the fray and blinked. "What was that?" Raven, voice hushed, replied, "The reason I couldn't speak freely, Ashbourne left that thing in my shadow." Cyborg tracked the beast with a visor scan, mouth agape. "Then it's good you didn't say anything," he said, eyeing Raven. "That thing would have made you into food." The alternate Superman, bruised but standing tall, watched as the Shadow Bear decimated entire platoons with bestial rage and supernatural power. He cracked a smile. "Now I want to meet this Ashbourne." The shoreline trembled beneath the weight of war. Aquaman, Mera, and a contingent of the surviving Green Lanterns from OS stood at the edge of the battlefield, battered but unyielding. Near them in the sea, the Atlantean warships, their cannons unleashing powerful bursts of energy, shattering the air with each shot as they targeted the swarms of flying parademons overhead. Aquaman's eyes flared with fury as he watched his people fall. Warriors of Atlantis being shot down or dragged into the air and torn apart, their screams echoing over the crashing waves. One of the great ships exploded in a thunderous burst of flame and shrapnel, raining debris into the ocean. He growled, knuckles white around his trident. "No more." Beside him, Mera struck down a charging parademon with a spear of water. She glanced over her shoulder, voice trembling with disbelief. "This is madness. How many of these things do we have to destroy before it ends?" One of the Green Lanterns, panting and injured, turned to her grimly. "Darkseid doesn't just conquer planets, he enslaves them. He turns their people into his army, and this one, voice dropping, he's conquered entire dimensions. Gods know how many armies he commands now." Aquaman stepped forward, jaw clenched. "I don't care how many. We don't give up. If we do, it's the end of everything." But even as he spoke, the skies above rippled with a familiar and terrifying distortion. Another boom tube opened. From it poured dozens of glowing green figures descending like silent meteors. For a moment, confusion washed over the defenders. Aquaman narrowed his eyes. Lanterns? But one of the remaining Green Lanterns took a step back in pure horror, his ring flickering with fear. "No, what have they done?" The new arrivals were Green Lanterns no longer. Their bodies were fused with twisted machinery, green power glowing from corrupted circuitry and mechanical limbs, half-machine abominations, their eyes devoid of will or mercy. And then the sky turned green. An overwhelming wave of emerald light surged from the corrupted lanterns, blanketing the city in a blinding glow. The defenders shielded their eyes, only to hear the scream of engines torn from the sea. The Atlantean ships, all of them, were dragged violently from the ocean, hoisted into the air like toys. Aquaman stepped forward in horror, his voice breaking. "No, stop!" But it was too late. In coordinated precision, the corrupted lanterns crushed the floating ships with their power. One after another, explosions lit the sky as Atlantean soldiers were vaporized or hurled to their deaths. The ocean was littered with debris, corpses, and the fire of sinking wreckage. Within minutes, the majority of Atlantis' mighty fleet was gone. Mera collapsed to her knees, tears brimming. The remaining Green Lanterns stared in silence, despair taking root. But worse still, far beyond their view, across the world, boom tubes continued to open. And from each one, massive drills, titanic, hellish machines descended from the portals. They embedded themselves in Earth's crust with earth-shattering force and began to drill deep and fast. Darkseid wasn't just waging a war, he was ending a planet. And though Earth's defenders had shown more resistance than he had expected, it was nowhere near enough to stop him. High above the burning city, the sky was torn apart by the violent clash between Galatea and Grail. The two warriors exchanged devastating blows, fists colliding with thunderous shockwaves. Galatea's heat vision met Grail's omega beams again and again. Neither gaining a clear advantage, bruises marred their skin, cuts stained their armor, but their resolve held firm. But not all battles above were as balanced. Farther off, Kara staggered, barely holding herself upright. Her blonde hair was matted with blood, her face swollen and bruised. Across from her floated dark Supergirl, a twisted mirror of herself, her smile wild and unhinged. Though she bore a few marks of the fight, they were shallow compared to Kara's devastating injuries. With a laugh echoing through the air, dark Supergirl slammed her fist into Kara's chest, sending her rocketing toward the earth like a meteor. The impact cracked the pavement below. As Kara struggled to even breathe, her dark counterpart turned her gaze toward Galatea and Grail, still locked in battle. Her red eyes gleamed with cruel intent. In a blur, dark Supergirl launched forward, slamming into Galatea from behind before she could react. Galatea grunted in pain, staggering from the surprise blow. Then came the onslaught of Grail and dark Supergirl together, pummeling Galatea from both sides in a chaotic, unrelenting storm of fists and beams. Trapped, Galatea fought to stay upright, blood dripping from her lips. Then dark Supergirl seized her, arms locked around her chest, holding her in place. "Grail," she taunted with a grin. "Her eyes don't suit her, why not help her out?" Grail's smirk twisted. "With pleasure." Omega energy sparked in Grail's eyes. A devastating red beam erupted forward. Galatea screamed as the Omega beam struck her right eye, searing through the socket and disfiguring the right side of her face with smoking ruin. Grail tilted her head, inspecting the damage like an artist admiring her work. "Yes, the right side's much better now. Let me help fix the left." But Karu returned, bloodied but burning with fury. She smashed her fist into Grail's face, then spun to strike dark Supergirl, staggering them both just long enough to grab Galatea and attempt to flee. Their retreat was short-lived. Both dark Supergirl and Grail fired simultaneously, Omega Beam and Heat Vision streaking through the air. Kara glanced back, and in that instant knew there was no escape. Gritting her teeth, she twisted her body, taking the full brunt of both attacks to shield Galatea. The blast struck her back, searing her flesh. The two women crashed into the ground below, landing in a crater of scorched earth and blood. Galatea groaned, forcing herself upright with trembling legs, her face half destroyed, her body battered. She looked at Kara's burnt and broken form beside her remaining eye. Then the earth shook. Grail landed hard, laughing as she grabbed Galatea's arm. "You didn't think it was over, did you?" With a sharp twist, she snapped Galatea's arm like a twig. Galatea screamed. As the dark Supergirl descended, triumphant and smirking, a blur of shadow surged forward. With a thunderous punch, Shadow Doomsday slammed into dark Supergirl, sending her flying. Grail spun to react, but the towering beast struck her next, launching her into the air like a ragdoll. Panting, Galatea stood despite her broken arm. Through clenched teeth, her one remaining eye blazing with rage, she pointed at the two enemies now recovering in the distance. "Kill them, rip them apart," she ordered the beast. "Murder the two bitches." And as Shadow Doomsday roared, Galatea used her remaining arm to pull Kara's limp body close, lifting her as best she could. With every ounce of strength left, she ran. Superman stood amidst the ruins, his chest heaving, blood streaming down several wounds. His once pristine suit was shredded, his cape torn and clinging to his back in tatters. At his feet lay the lifeless, broken body of cyborg Superman, sparks flickering weakly from the cyborg's skull as it finally went still. He barely had time to catch his breath when he heard the flutter of wind and turned. Galatea landed nearby, her clothes scorched and shredded, half of her face ruined and her arm twisted and broken. In her other arm, she carried Kara burnt and battered, her body motionless. Superman's eyes widened in horror. "Are you okay?" he asked, his voice hoarse, eyes flickering between them. Galatea stared at him, her good eye filled with exhaustion and fury. "Do we look okay to you?" she snapped, her voice sharp but tired. In the distance, explosions echoed again, louder this time. Fire lit up the sky as another massive ship fell from orbit. Superman gently took Kara from Galatea's arms, holding his cousin close, cradling her with care. "Let's regroup with the others and organize," he said, voice low and tight. "This is going out of control." Galatea gave a tired nod, wiping blood from her mouth, and turned to follow him. The three moved away from the heart of the battle, each step heavier than the last. They eventually reached the Amazonian defensive line, or what remained of it. Superman's expression twisted with grief as his eyes swept the battlefield. Corpses littered the ground, not only Amazonian warriors, but heroes he had once fought beside. Mr. Terrific, Booster Gold, and others whose names burned in his memory lay still, their battles lost, their sacrifices unspoken. A familiar voice, strained but unbroken, called out, "Clark, you don't look good." Superman turned toward the voice. Wonder Woman stood there, blood soaking her armor. A long, deep gash marred her shoulder, and her left arm hung limp at her side. Her sword was coated in gore, her breathing shallow. "Things are bad," she said weakly. "We are losing, Clark." Superman didn't respond at first. He just stood there, holding Kara, his face a mask of pain. Beside him, Galatea remained silent, her own expression unreadable. Darkseid fought with calculated fury, his fists crashing against the black creature. Though his power was unmatched, the creature was faster, dodging even his Omega beams, a feat that few across the multiverse could claim. Despite the prolonged combat, the creature showed no sign of fatigue. Though locked in this battle, Darkseid watched the war unfold beyond them. His armies were winning, slowly but surely, yet the tide wasn't without resistance. These black creatures, similar in appearance to the one he fought, were tearing through his forces in savage waves. They never tired, never retreated, or showed fear. Darkseid's eyes narrowed as he sensed a cluster of these creatures surrounding a girl with glowing eyes in the distance. Hundreds of the creatures moved around her, clearly protecting her, and from afar he could see corpses piling at her feet. Thousands of his soldiers had already fallen to her and her army. He analyzed quickly, his conclusion simple: the girl was either controlling them or was part of their plan. It did not matter. Without hesitation, Darkseid himself began heading toward the girl's position. Brew moved to follow him, but in an instant, hundreds of Paradooms blocked the way. Trapped, he roared and lashed out, but couldn't escape them in time. Darkseid descended from the sky like a meteor, landing before the Shadow Army and the girl at their center. The ground quaked under his feet, his presence alone drawing the attention of every creature nearby. In the sky, Stargirl, battling alongside the shadows, saw him arrive and panicked. She dove at him in a desperate attack. Darkseid's eyes lit up, Omega beams zigzagging through the air directly toward the girl. Stargirl froze in horror, too fast to dodge. But Asa, commanding the shadows, yelled with desperate clarity, "Defend Courtney." Several Shadow Knights moved instantly, raising their hands and conjuring shields of darkness in front of Courtney. The beams struck. The shield shattered, hurling Courtney to the ground. But she survived, gasping, pained, and stunned. Darkseid scoffed, "So, you are the one controlling them." He unleashed more Omega beams, this time targeting Ace directly. The Shadow Army reacted instantly, some creating shields, others charging him, knowing they were too slow to fully protect her. Ace clenched her jaw, eyes narrowed, but she could feel her powers having no effect on him directly. She turned her focus to directing the other forces, desperately trying to hold the tide. Darkseid tore through the weaker shadows, when suddenly, Baru, unstoppable and enraged, arrived, slamming into him and sending them both crashing underground through buildings and debris. "Retreat!" Ace screamed, her voice broken with urgency. Courtney, recovering, and Rex nodded, turning to flee. But a tremor rippled through the ground and Omega beams burst upward, twisting through the air toward Ace. She turned too late. Rix leapt between her and the beam, taking the full brunt of it. His body was incinerated instantly, turned to ash before her eyes. Ace froze. She didn't move. She couldn't. She simply stared at the spot where Rex had stood, where he died until another thunderous explosion rang out. Burrow's body was flung from the underground, crashing into a nearby building. Darkseid rose, unharmed, his eyes glowing. A pointless sacrifice. You will follow soon. Ace turned slowly to face him. Her face twisted not in fear, but in fury. Her glowing golden eyes shifted, flashing into silver. The power Ashbourne had sealed away years ago all came back to her. In that instant, the world trembled as she screamed. Darkseid staggered as the air warped around him. The ground split, and buildings crumbled in the wake of her unleashed power. Her glare unleashed a massive warping shockwave toward Darkseid, causing him and everything in her sight to be crushed and pushed in the direction of her glare. Ace dropped to her knees, screaming, blood and tears streaming from her eyes. The wave of devastation did not go unnoticed, as a huge chunk of the city was destroyed completely. From afar, Superman, Galatea, and the surviving heroes witnessed the destruction. Galatea bowed her head, a silent mourning for Rex's sacrifice. Others stared, wide-eyed, daring to hope. Darkseid had fallen, killed by the devastating attack. But their hope was short-lived. An explosion rang out from the debris. Smoke burst outward. Darkseid rose, unharmed, eyes burning brighter than before. "Baru, kill him!" Ace screamed, her voice cracking. The shadow creature obeyed instantly, charging with renewed rage, but was intercepted by hundreds of paradooms. They piled onto him, slashing, biting, ripping. Darkseid looked at him, and from his eyes an Omega beam, the largest yet, which tore through the battlefield and struck Burrow, destroying most of its body. The world stopped. But from the darkness, shadows surged, and Burrow recovered, its body regenerating before them all. Darkseid growled. "How long can you keep regenerating?" Burrow turned to face him, then froze. Its body began trembling, posture shifting into something unnatural, fearful. The almighty terrifying creature was nowhere to be seen. Darkseid smirked. "Afraid now? It is too late, creature." But Burrow ignored him and looked back, wide-eyed, like something primordial was about to enter the battlefield. The other shadows began shaking violently, every single one of them trembling in unspoken terror. Then Burrow spoke, its voice clear and terrified. "My king knows he is furious.